Chapter 631, Prince of Heavenly Knights Sect. There was no lack of talent in this world. Who could even have a breakthrough by drinking water? Could you imagine that? While chatting, Zhang Han and his friends arrived at North Sea Park in Shangjing. There was an island in the center of the park with a farm on it. Some crops were planted around the garden, making it a little like the planting area on Mount New Moon, but there were fewer crops here. Generally speaking, February was not the time for the northerners to plant, but the crops here were vibrant, and it was obvious that the warlord of Chan clan had used some treasures. The farm was not large, with only 3 small houses in it. There was an ordinary willow tree in the main yard with a small tea table in the shed. Some chickens, ducks and geese were running around in the backyard. It looked like an ordinary farm. Elder Chen also likes a quiet and comfortable life. Gaik Singkong smiled. Through the conversation on the road, Gaik Singkong felt that the warlord of Chan clan held no malice towards Zhang Han. Even if he had bad intentions towards Zhang Han, Emperor King, who was standing behind Zhang Han, would not agree with him. Emperor King's support for Zhang Han was so strong that Gaik Singkong firmly believed that the relationship between Emperor King and Zhang Han was extraordinary. What surprised Gaik Singkong even more was Zhang Han's attitude towards Emperor King. If he didn't know that Zhang Han already had a wife and daughter, Gaik Singkong would wonder whether the two men were gays. Hearing Gaik Singkong's words, the warlord of Chan clan smiled a little proudly and said, "Learning to cultivate one's personality and moral character is also a science. I planted everything here one by one, from which I experienced nature and gained a lot. Is that so?" Seeing the complacent expression of the warlord of Chan clan, Gaik Singkong could not help but sneer at him. No wonder Han filled a whole mountain with such plants. His mountain is 20 times larger than your island, so it is a kind of self-cultivation. Maybe I'll have to try when I go back. The warlord of Chan clan's mouth quivered slightly. He just sighed with emotion and didn't want to compete with anyone. Why did he say 20 times? Is it the larger the area, the more remarkable? But Gaik Singkong's next words made his face a little stiffer. There were not only crops there, both his mountain and lawn were planted with natural precious materials. Gaik Singkong said with ease, "Let's go down." The warlord of Chan clan landed on the island. He didn't want to talk with Gaik Singkong anymore. Gaik Singkong landed on the island with a smile, followed by Zhang Han and Chen Chenking. They landed right under the willows in the front yard, where there were 2 chairs by the tea table. The warlord of Chan clan slightly waved his hand and 2 wooden chairs appeared magically. "Take a seat." The warlord of Chan clan conjured a pot of hot tea and 4 cups. "Grandpa, just say what you want to say. I'm going to visit my sister-in-law and brother Han's daughter later." Chen Chenking was the first to speak. The warlord of Chan clan felt a little depressed. What's going on? Why is he more impatient than me? "Elder Chen, what do you want to tell me?" asked Zhang Han. "Don't worry. Try my tea first." The warlord of Chan clan shrugged. The other 3 took a sip of their tea. The fragrance lingers for a long time. Good tea. Good tea. Gaik Singkong's eyes lit up as he praised. Chen Chenking didn't say anything because he had drunk the tea several times before. Zhang Han took a big sip like drinking water, and then nodded. "Not bad. Not bad. Don't you know the value of this tea?" The warlord of Chan clan was a little discontented. A strong man like him could speak with such tone and expression, which showed that he regarded Zhang Han as his family. "Grandpa, don't show off." Chen Chenking coughed softly. "Bad boy." The warlord of Chan clan snorted. Then he began to drink his cup of tea in silence, which calmed down his guests. About a minute later, he drank up a cup of tea and served himself another cup. While doing this, he looked at Gaik Singkong, hesitated for a moment, and finally looked at Zhang Han and said, "Do you know your identity and background?" "My identity and background?" Zhang Han was surprised. What the warlord of Chan clan mentioned is certainly not my identity as a young master of the Zhang family. Is there anything else I don't know? Zhang Han shook his head as he pondered. Gai Xingkong was also a little confused, not knowing what the warlord of Chan clan meant. Chen Qingqing's expression returned to its normal state. He sat beside them drinking tea, not intending to interrupt, but only to be a qualified audience. Other martial artists would be shocked if they knew that the well-known Emperor King was here to be a spectator. The warlord of Chan clan paused and asked Zhang Han, "Do you know your father's identity? Has Gai Xingkong told you about him? Why do you know about Guanyu and me, Elder Chen?" Gai Xingkong was surprised. "He told me a long time ago." The warlord of Chan clan nodded. Then he nodded again at Zhang Han and continued, "Your father is the young master of Heavenly Knights sect in Cultivation World, which means that he is not an ordinary martial artist. Once you get into this world, you have to obey its rules more or less. When your father came to cultivate himself in the main world, he met your mother, and me." Gai Xingkong notified him. Warlord of Chan clan paused to calm himself down and then continued, "At first your father was not regarded as a member of the Zhang clan in Shangjing. Your father is also very distinguished in the world lit, because he is the young master of Heavenly Knights sect." At this point, Zhang Guanyu's identity was obvious. A young master. This identity was not the same as what they knew before. Both Zhang Han and Chen Qingqing were so curious that they couldn't remain calm anymore. Even Gai Xingkong fell into silence. Under their gaze, the warlord of Chan clan said something that shocked all present. "Because your grandfather is Zhang Wang, the owner of Heavenly Knights sect." Boom! Gai Xingkong heard a clap of thunder in his mind. While Zhang Han, as a reborn monster, was not so surprised at anything, Chen Qingqing was a young martial artist who didn't know much about the forces in the world lit. Gai Xingkong was the only one among the three people who knew how noble the owner of Heavenly Knights sect was. Why didn't Guanyu tell me? Gai Xingkong was a little dissatisfied. The more you know, the more danger you face. The warlord of Chan clan replied. Then he turned to look at Zhang Han and said, "Your grandfather is Zhang Wang. Can you understand your father's identity as a young master now? I was lucky to have received the favor of Zhang Wang. Later, I learned that the war between the Heavenly Knights sect and the Wind Snow School had been very cruel, so I took the initiative to arrange for your father to stay in the Zhang clan in Shangjing. After several years of war, Zhang Wang and the owner of Wind Snow School went to a secret place for a one-on-one battle, and I don't know the result of this. Since then, there has been less fighting between the Heavenly Knights sect and the Wind Snow School, so it was time for your father to be the Lord of Battle. Your father's strength rocketed up after those battles and he soon advanced into the Grand Master stage. In that era when there was no Grand Master to be seen in the main world, your father was definitely matchless, but he decided to live in seclusion after your mother gave birth to you and your sister. Therefore, he cooperated with Gai Xingkong to fool everyone and pretended to be defeated. Unfortunately, it wasn't long before King Zhenzi found him. King Zhenzi was of the divine realm and your father couldn't defeat him. I went to help your father as soon as I heard the news, and managed to save his life. When I saw you, I'm convinced that there will be no laggard among the children of a brave and talented martial artist. The warlord of Chan clan sighed with emotion. Zhang Han, you are better than your father and even as marvelous as Zhang Wang, your grandfather. You are now the Prince of Heavenly Knights sect and the new young master in the future, someone who is expected to grow up and strengthen Heavenly Knights sect. But as Wind Snow School becomes more and more powerful, the pressure you have to face will be greater. So, young man, you have to continue to work hard. You would have lived a peaceful life if you hadn't stepped into the martial arts world. But you have not only stepped into our world, but become so talented and outstanding. I think you are the great hope to re-energize the Heavenly Knights sect." The expressions of everyone on the scene changed significantly. Gai Xingkong's face was stiff because he didn't expect to hear such a remark today. This kind of little-known news could indeed be called secret news.
Even Gai Xingkong, Zhang Wengyu's good brother, had never been told about it. Although he knew it was a way to protect him, Gai Xingkong was a little angry. "Why, you look down on me? Can't I bear the pressure with you? What's more, Zhang Guangyu advanced into the Grand Master stage earlier than me, but he pretended to be a Heaven stage master. I want to beat him so much." Although he was dissatisfied, he couldn't help it, and he cared more about Zhang Han. Therefore, he slowly turned his head and looked at Zhang Han. Zhang Han was also surprised. Yes, it was out of his expectation. Zhang Han didn't expect that he was involved in the affairs about the sects, Heavenly Knights sect, Wind Snow School, long-term hatred, and King's Ends in the world lit. What chaos! How I wish I was now at the innateness stage and could use some powerful methods. Foundation stage, after all, is only the entry level. Han, you will be busy. Gai Xingkong sighed. Zhang Han also fell into silence. He didn't want to get involved in this conflict, he just wanted to watch Meng grow up and live a peaceful life, but it involved his father. These trivial matters could only be discussed after the gate of the world lit was opened and he brought his parents back. In terms of your identity, Zhang Han, you come from a martial arts family, just like Mugs. What is different is that she comes from the Luofu sword sect with fewer enemies than you. In the world lit, it's rare to see wars as fierce as those between Heavenly Knights sect and Wind Snow School. The warlord of Chan clan shook his head and said. He used the word war to illustrate the seriousness and cruelty of these events. Chapter 632, Two Divine Objects. What is the cause of the grudge between Heavenly Knights sect and Wind Snow School? Gai Xingkong asked. Many people in the martial arts world, especially those of the older generation, knew that Heavenly Knights sect and Wind Snow School were rivals, but they didn't know the specific reasons as to why these two forces were sworn enemies. Gai Xingkong was also curious about the reason. This, I don't know. The warlord of Chan clan shook his head, but Zhang Han will surely find out later. Yes. Gai Xingkong nodded and looked at Zhang Han, Prince of Heavenly Knights sect. Uncle Gai may depend on you in the future. Uncle Gai, you are good at joking. Zhang Han shook his head. Even without Zhang Han's help, Gai Xingkong could become a member of Heavenly Knights sect or at least use the resources of Heavenly Knights sect by virtue of his relationship with Zhang Han's father. If Zhang Han didn't go to the northeast and didn't meet with Gai Xingkong would go to Heavenly Knights sect after the gate of the small world was opened, where he would find another perfect way to advance into the divine realm. Hearing Zhang Han's words, Gai Xingkong turned his gaze to Emperor King with his eyes narrowed slightly. He had to admit that Emperor King was outstanding, and even as excellent as Zhang Han in terms of strength. After all, martial artists with King Dragon blood were very rare. Gai Xingkong hesitated for a while, and felt that his relationship with Zhang Han had brought him closer to the other two, so he continued to ask. Emperor King has also advanced to the higher stage in a perfect way, right? Yes, just call me Chen King, Uncle Gai. Shan King replied politely. Ha ha. Gai Xingkong smiled and shook his head. He secretly sighed with emotion that 3 of the 4 people on the scene had reached the divine realm, while Zhang Han, though at a lower stage, was actually a genius even more powerful than martial artists at the divine realm. Zhang Han and Emperor King both experienced a perfect breakthrough. There were also differences in advancing from the Grand Master late stage to the divine realm, which could be divided into the early stage, the middle stage and the later stage. Martial artists who had made perfect breakthroughs had a stable foundation and could advance directly to the God Realm medium stage. Their future cultivation would be much easier as if their talent had improved. Ordinary breakthroughs could only promote martial artists to the early stage of divine realm, where it required more resources for them to advance to the middle stage. Therefore, most martial artists cultivated hard to make perfect breakthroughs. As for the warlord of Chan clan,
Zhang Han knew that he was at God Realm late stage and very close to the Earth Realm. After chatting for a while, Zhang Han checked the time, stood up and said, "It's late, I have to go back." "Why, are you not going to try some of my own chickens, ducks and geese?" the warlord of Chan clan asked politely. "No, thank you." Zhang Han shook his head. Gai Xingkong grinned and joked, "Elder Chen, I don't want to get you down, but the ingredients on Han's mountain, well, you can try them when it is convenient. I found out for the first time that you don't know the art of speaking." The warlord of Chan clan glared at Gai Xingkong. "Grandpa, I'll visit them, could you please lend me some gifts?" Chen Qingqing whispered, "Don't you have some treasures of your own? What do you want to borrow from me?" The warlord of Chan clan waved his hand. He knew that there were 2 divine objects and a few heaven-grade treasures in Chen Qingqing's space ring, which were enough as gifts, but Chen Qingqing's next words made the warlord of Chan clan almost spit blood. "Well, Grandpa, maybe you can lend me your soul protection bracelet, boy." The warlord of Chan clan stared at him. "Now that you have obtained some achievements, you are starting to pay attention to your grandfather's treasures? I'll definitely pay it back later." Chen Qingqing felt a little embarrassed. At this moment, Chen Qingqing was like a very ordinary person, who was completely different from the extraordinary Emperor King. It was rare to see such a shy Chen Qingqing. The warlord of Chan clan controlled his trembling mouth while looking at Chen Qingqing helplessly. Gai Xingkong was curious about their conversation and wondered what was the soul protection ring. Zhang Han was amused by them, but he didn't want to refuse Chen Qingqing's gift. The warlord of Chan clan hesitated for 5 seconds and finally summoned 2 bracelets that looked the same. Zhang Han was surprised because he failed to see through the bracelets. The soul protection bracelet can protect your mind and soul from being hurt by various spells. In general, it takes more than a minute for martial artists at Divine Realm to break its defense. The warlord of Chan clan stopped introducing the treasures. Because he felt that Zhang Han had pierced his soul sense into them, Zhang Han withdrew his soul sense within 1 second. A long examination would damage the pair of divine objects. 2 divine objects that can protect one's soul. Pretty good. Zhang Han made a gesture of obeisance at the warlord of Chan clan without saying anything. "Thank you, Grandpa." Chen Qingqing grinned and took the pair of bracelets with his right hand. Then he looked at Zhang Han. "Brother Han, let's go." "Okay." Zhang Han nodded and then turned his gaze to Gai Xingkong. Knowing that Zhang Han was about to say something, Gai Xingkong waved his hand and smiled. "You go first, I'll stay here to have a talk with Elder Chen." Zhang Han and Chen Qingqing ascended into the air and flew to the shore. While flying, Chen Qingqing said, "Brother Han, I will not prepare your gift, forget it." Zhang Han smiled and shook his head. "I'll give you a gift in a few days." "Wow, it is better to accept deferentially than to decline courteously." Chen Qingqing replied with a smile, "By the way, I didn't expect Xian to be my sister-in-law. Brother Han, you are so marvelous that you got married with such a beauty. Is my sister-in-law a martial artist?" "No." Zhang Han shook his head. "Well, Brother Han, you are so powerful that it must be easy for you to turn my sister-in-law into a grandmaster." Chen Qingqing was confused. Isn't cultivation a better way to protect Xian than relying on bodyguards or treasures? She can't cultivate for the time being. Zhang Han thought about it and said slowly, "Perhaps she will become a very powerful cultivator when she is able to cultivate." "Really? That's good." Chen Qingqing took a glance at Zhang Han. Though he still had a few questions, he thought it would be better for him to ask Zhang Han later. "Shall we go back by car?" Chen Qingqing asked when they arrived at the shore. "Sure." Zhang Han nodded. They landed in a deserted forest and scattered the light around them, showing their bodies. As they walked out of the woods, they found it a paradise for tourists. As soon as they reached the edge of the forest, they saw a man and a woman coming from the front. When the latter saw Chen Qingqing and Zhang Han chatting happily, They were stunned first, and then their facial expression became complicated. When Zhang Han and Chen Shenking left, the man exchanged a look with the woman and then exclaimed, "That's so cool." They seemed to have misunderstood something. Walking to the side of the road, Chen Shenking saw a shop not far from them, and he suddenly smiled. "Want a cigarette?" He thought of the time when they were smoking and bragging on the side of the road. "Okay." Zhang Han smiled casually. A note with a face value of 100 yuan suddenly appeared in Chen Shenking's right hand, and green light began swirling around him as he waved his hand. At the next moment, the note disappeared and was replaced by a box of cigarettes that they used to smoke. Clap, clap. The sound of two lighters sounded, and then the two began to smoke on the side of the road. Phew. Chen Shenking puffed out a puff of cigarette smoke and shook his head. "This cigarette has no flavor. What flavor do you want since you have reached the divine realm?" Zhang Han was amused. "Yes." Chen Shenking saw a taxi coming and waved his hand. When the car stopped in front of them, they threw away their cigarettes, which turned into ashes and dissipated before landing. "Where do you want to go?" the driver asked when they got into the taxi. "Dongfeng Hotel." Zhang Han replied. "Okay." The driver started the car. He didn't know that the two people sitting in the back could shake the whole city with a single stomp. At this time, many big families were still shocked by what had happened at noon. The Liu family held a collective meeting. When Patriarch Liu saw Liu Feng, he would sigh with emotion. "You are so lucky. No one in the Hua nation can stop Zhang Han Yang. He's too strong." The era of merciless Zhang is also the era of disaster for the rich and noble. "I've announced that we can't provoke Zhang Han and his family members from now on, especially Ziyan." This scene was taking place in all the rich or noble families in Shangjing. Especially the family members of the younger generation had been warned countless times. The family members of the older generation were more cunning, and they would not have any problems or cause trouble. Most of the people who caused trouble were the young and energetic generation. While warning the young generations, the older generations began to reprimand them and list their recent troubles. This incident between Zhang Han and Chen Shenking brought unexpected calamities to many people, but they just felt afraid and didn't dare to be angry. The Zhang family members all felt nervous. "What can we do?" They thought Emperor King could suppress Zhang Han Yang and help them to get rid of the 10 billion yuan compensation. But it turned out that Emperor King was Zhang Han's little brother. They had a headache. They must be more careful now in order not to annoy both Zhang Han and Emperor King. At this moment, all the members of the Zhang family were silent. They felt pain and regret. They didn't seize such a good opportunity. They didn't expect Zhang Han, who had left the Zhang family, to become so strong just a few years later. Alas! Zhang Nan sighed, stood up and walked out. His figure bent a little at this moment, as if he suddenly grew old. When he came to the door, Zhang Nan slowly turned around, and there was no light in his eyes. "Get ready the compensation. I will take you to Dongfeng Hotel to make an apology tomorrow." Zhang Han and Chen Shenking took a taxi to the gate of Dongfeng Hotel. Chen Shenking paid 100 yuan and refused the change, which made the driver happy. After entering the hotel, they took the elevator to the 9th floor. When they stepped into the corridor, they saw a man push open a door and come out. "Wow, boss is back." It was Instructor Liu, who cheered and then turned around to run. On the way to the innermost room, he knocked on the door of every room he passed and informed the people inside that the boss is back. Everyone on this floor was shocked. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Wang Zanping, Wang Ming, Wang Zanzong and a few others ran out of other rooms. They were surprised and confused to see Chen Shenking standing beside Zhang Han, and they seemed to have guessed something. "Let's go in first." Zhang Han smiled and everyone walked into the room on the innermost side. The hall was big enough to hold more than 10 people, and it was not very crowded. "Sweetheart, Papa." Zhang Han's wife and daughter left the sofa to run towards him. Ziyan had long legs, so it took her less time to approach Zhang Han and give him a big hug. After a while, Xian gave Zhang Han to Meng Meng. The little girl was anxious to hug her father. "Papa, give me a hug." Meng Meng raised her head and stretched out her little arms. "Okay." Zhang Han smiled and crouched down to embrace Meng Meng. Meow. Meng Meng kissed Zhang Han on the cheek twice and then said, "Papa, why did you take so long to return? It's been such a long time." "Well, Dad had been talking with my good friend before he returned." Zhang Han went to the side of the sofa with Meng Meng in her arms. "Let's sit down first." After everyone sat down, Zhang Han introduced Chen Chengqing to them. "I'd like to introduce Chen Chengqing, a good friend of mine from childhood, to you. He is Emperor King, you know well." Hiss. All Zhang Han's friends gasped in astonishment. "Emperor King?" Lieutenant's mouth slightly quivered. Wang Zanping and others also felt the roots of their teeth cool. This title was frightening in the martial arts world. Zhang Li was the only one who looked at him casually and said, "Isn't it you, little Chengqing?" "Lilai." Chen Chengqing smiled at Zhang Li and then stood up to greet the others. "Hello, everyone, I'm Chen Chengqing. Nice to meet you." Lieutenant quickly stood up and greeted him. Wang Zanping and Wang Ming followed him. The Emperor King was polite and modest. They couldn't just sit on the sofa and reply him casually. Therefore, they all stood up as soon as they could. Zhao Feng, Xuyong, Instructor Liu, Leng and others respectfully called him Mr. Chen. Only the three members of Zhang Han's family did not stand up. Chen Chengqing was a little embarrassed and waved his hand. "Please sit down, don't be so courteous to me. You are Brother Han's elders and also my elders." His attitude relaxed the others. They didn't expect the famous Emperor King to be so approachable. Approachable? A few martial artists present, including Lieutenant and Wang Zanping, were surprised at their own thoughts. My gosh, he is not approachable at all. He is just approachable in front of Zhang Han. So Zhang Han Yang is the greatest. Everyone turned their gaze to Zhang Han with admiration. Everyone sat down, but Chen Chengqing, facing Xian and Meng Meng, did not sit down. He slightly narrowed his eyes and looked down at Xian and Meng Meng's feet. It seemed too formal. Everyone could feel Chen Chengqing's respect for Zhang Han's wife and daughter, sister-in-law, and Meng Meng. "It's the first time I'm meeting you, and I want to give you this pair of bracelets. I hope you like them." Chen Chengqing summoned the bracelets, which appeared in his right palm. Soul Protection Bracelet. Both the bracelets were divine objects and fourth-stage spirit treasures. Zhang Han knew that they were able to effectively defend against spell attacks, so he was very grateful to Chen Chengqing. The bracelets were milky white, which looked like jade and were very beautiful, but they felt more like leather than jade bracelets. Chen Chengqing held a corner of the bracelets with both hands and handed them to Xian. "Thank you." Xian hurriedly stood up and took the gifts. "The bracelets are very beautiful. Chengqing, please sit down. You are Zhang Han's good friend. Zhang Han keeps your old cell phone number, so I know you have a good relationship with him." "Ha ha, yes, sister-in-law, you can treat me as Brother Han's little brother." Chen Chengqing smiled and then sat down on the side of Zhang Han. It was not polite for him to talk with Xian too much. He felt that as a little brother, he must keep a proper distance from his sister-in-law, neither too close nor too distant. The gifts were given, and Chen Chengqing relaxed a little. "Meng Meng, do you think the bracelets are pretty?" Xian sat back and looked down at Meng Meng. "They are beautiful." Meng Meng answered without hesitation. "Then what should we say?" Xian asked with a smile. "Well." Meng Meng looked at Chen Chengqing, and then waved her right hand lovingly like a lucky cat. "Thank you, big brother." "Ha ha." Xian burst out laughing. "Not big brother, you should call him uncle. He is Uncle Chen." "Thank you, Uncle Chen." Meng Meng said again. "You're welcome." "Ha ha, Brother Han, sister-in-law, your daughter is so lovely." Chen Chengqing grinned. All the others were also amused by Meng Meng. They all liked Meng Meng. At the same time, They realized the truth. When Meng Meng grows up, her supporters, it's amazing. She had Zhang Han who loved her so much, Uncle Chen Chenking, Gaik Kong, Tanan and so on. It was amazing and they dared not think about it anymore. But they didn't know that Zhang Han had a more amazing identity. He was the Prince of Heavenly Knights sect. It was beyond their imagination. Put on your bracelet, it's a great gift. Zhang Han smiled, reached for the bracelet and put it on Xian and Meng Meng's wrist. While giving Meng Meng her gift, Zhang Han smiled, Dad's going to do a trick for you. Great. Meng Meng's eyes lit up. In her clear eyes, her papa shook his palm in front of her smaller one. The large bracelet became smaller, began to flash, and then disappeared. Where is it? Meng Meng was surprised. It is hidden by your dad. Zhang Han replied with a smile. Wang Zanping, Tanan and others were all stunned. Damn it, is it true? 2 divine objects? They thought that this seemingly ordinary bracelets may be some valuable handicraft. But when Zhang Han put the bracelets on his wife and daughter and made them take Xian and Meng Meng as their masters, the others recognized the treasures from their special chi. They were 2 divine objects. Emperor King gave 2 divine objects at one time. Chapter 633, The Chen Family's Guests. This. Wang Zanping smiled and shook his head. He realized that he had misunderstood the precious degree of treasures before. When the Wang family and mystical fog sect competed for mountains and rivers flag, he felt that Xiang Qishan was almost the same. There were many treasures, but they didn't usually see them. Since he met Zhang Han, he had seen the Thunder Yang tree and Thunder Yang flower on the mountain, the spiritual marrow that Wang Ming mentioned, and the relics found by the boat of curse in Singapore, where he obtained a holy object, and the Yuan King tree. He had also seen the batch of gemstones taken back from the relics of Mount He Snow in the northeast, the bunch of herbs taken from the land of extreme Yang in Linhai City, the demon dancing sword and golden armor that Zhang Han snatched, Zhang Han's cards known as a divine object, and roaring flame saber, the divine weapon which once belonged to Gedonglai. Now Zhang Han again obtained a pair of bracelets known as divine objects. Now Zhang Han had 3 divine weapons or divine objects, 5 divine objects and countless heaven-grade treasures. Are these treasures precious? Number. Because Zhang Han had so much of them, Wang Zanping's thinking was the same as Tanan's. Zhang Han's treasure may be comparable to the Hong Kong treasure house in a period of time. Tanan thought. They looked at their own Wisant space treasures, and then sighed with emotion. At least, these treasures were still valuable for them. Papa, how did it disappear? Can you summon it again? Meng Meng looked at her wrist and said in confusion, well. Zhang Han wanted to have another try. Xian stopped him and said with a smile, he can't summon it out. Look, Mama's bracelet also disappeared. Papa is marvelous, he made them disappear. Meng Meng murmured. Everyone burst out laughing. Meng Meng always enlivened the atmosphere. Meng Meng, you haven't told Uncle Chen your name yet. Chen Chenking looked at Meng Meng and asked her, Uncle Chen, I'm Zhang Yumeng and they all call me Meng Meng. Meng Meng looked up at Chen Chenking and replied, Zhang Yumeng is a nice name, isn't it given by my sister-in-law? Chen Chenking asked with a smile. No. Xian couldn't help but cover her mouth and smile. Looking at Zhang Han, she replied. Meng Meng was born in San Diego and her name was Emily at first, but he didn't like the name and changed it into Zhang Yumeng without asking for my opinion. Thinking of that time, Xian felt it was very interesting. For every couple, the period when they first met and courted each other was a wonderful memory. Really? Ha, Brother Han, how could you come up with such a delicate name? Chen Chenking couldn't help but sneer at Zhang Han. You look down on your brother Han, yes? Do you dare to drink with me in the evening? Zhang Han glanced at him. They had a good relationship and could joke with each other without any worries. Sister-in-law. Chen Chenking smiled and shook his head. In the past, Brother Han used to poke fun at me because I couldn't drink much and would soon lose my sense of direction every time. I'd like to invite you to the Chen family today. I'll have dinner prepared and have a drink with Brother Han. Would you mind that, sister-in-law? Of course not. Xian smiled. He could drink more than you, maybe he can do the same now. No matter how much Zhang Han drank, Xian hadn't seen him drunk yet. Let's compete tonight. Chen Chengqing smiled. Chengqing, you are so handsome. Do you have a girlfriend? Xian asked casually. The others were intrigued by the question. They wondered if Emperor King had a girlfriend and how beautiful that girl might be. Was she as pretty as Xian? It was normal for a beautiful girl to be a hero's girlfriend. I don't have a girlfriend. Chen Chengqing took a look at the crowd, hesitated for a while, and then said, I don't have the time to find a girlfriend. I have been cultivating and have had no chance to go out freely until recently. You are so handsome, why haven't you got a girlfriend? I have a sister, who is also my agent. She went back to Hong Kong for some business, and she likes young men with big eyes and perfect noses. Xian said casually. Chen Chengqing was scared and hurriedly waved his hand. No, I'm feminine and tender. I'm not as manly and handsome as Brother Han. He didn't want to have a girlfriend now, so he added, to be honest, I have my own goddess. Why didn't I know you have a goddess? Zhang Han asked in confusion. It happened during the period after I left you before, in the first year of junior high school. It's a pity that I left later and promised to find her, but I didn't have time until now. Chen Chengqing shook his head slightly. After all these years, maybe she has already married someone else, but I still want to try to find her. Everyone was stunned at his words. Is Emperor King going to steal another person's wife? Seeing the expression of the crowd, Chen Chengqing hurriedly waved his hand. I just want to investigate her situation, so I can be assured. Oh, yes. Xian nodded. You are so calm that you didn't tell us this until now. Zhang Han took a look at Chen Chengqing. I was too shy to say more at that time. Chen Chengqing smiled. Yes. Zhang Han knew Chen Chengqing well, who used to be very dull. Under the influence of Zhang Han, he became more outgoing, but was often teased by Zhang Han because of his character. They talked from 3 to 5:30 in the afternoon. Chen Chengqing stood up after receiving a phone call from his family and said, the dinner party over there is ready, and the guest rooms have been arranged. Please stay crests there these days, so that I can entertain you. Chen Chengqing gradually became more and more outgoing since he followed Zhang Han. Later, he began to cultivate and finally became Emperor King. Now, Chen Chengqing was the backbone of the Chen family. Chen Chengqing could keep the Chen family prosperous for 100 years. Chen Chengqing had grown up, and he had too many qualifications as a martial artist at the divine realm. It would be easy for them to be enrolled by any sects in the worldlet. So now Chen Chengqing's position in the Chen family was higher than that of the patriarch. What was more, the other family members heard that Zhang Han Yang was invited to have dinner this time. Merciless Zhang from Hong Kong. The Chen family members were so excited and the other families envied them so much. Now the Chen family is supported by both Chen Chengqing and Zhang Han Yang, and they are brothers. It sounded more like a joke. Zhang Han and his friend packed their luggage, asked Zhao Feng to check out for them, and then went to the Chen family using several Rolls-Royce. Zhang Han's movements were known by many people who were interested in him. Now all the big families in Shangjing were paying attention to his every move here. They all fell into silence when they saw all those luxury cars. Both Zhang Han Yang and Emperor King were marvelous, and they dared not to imagine what they could achieve through cooperating with each other. No one in the world could suppress them except for those divine realm monsters who hadn't been seen for a long time. Chen Chengqing, Zhao Feng and instructor Liu took the lead in driving to the Chen family. Xuyong followed them with Zhang Han and his family in his car. Chen Chengqing didn't speak much along the way. He sat in the back seat and kept his eyes closed. Now he looked like a real Emperor King. Even Instructor Liu and Zhao Feng felt the pressure from him. They knew that it was not Emperor King's intention, but his own chi that brought them such a feeling. As a martial artist at Divine Realm, Emperor King was different from ordinary people. His body, meridian, soul sense and spiritual force were all perfect. He has already bid farewell to the body of ordinary people, so he would inadvertently leak out some unusual chi and make others feel some pressure. But Instructor Liu and Zhao Feng felt more psychological pressure at this time, because they both knew that Emperor King was following them. Such little pressure did not make them nervous. When they were halfway, Zhao Feng took the lead in saying, "Emperor King, did you and my master play together since childhood? The Chen family should be stronger than the Zhang family, right? How can you, call my master brother Han?" Zhao Feng was very clear that sometimes the position of a family also determined the position of an individual. The children of a big family seldom called those with lower positions big brother. Hearing this, Shan Chengqing smiled casually, "Just call me brother Chen." Shan Chengqing thought for a while and replied, "I'm not the same as brother Han. I was introverted and I didn't dare to talk with anyone else. It was only when I was with brother Han that I became outgoing. At that time, the strength of our two families was somewhat different, and the Zhang family was stronger because brother Han's father was very powerful, but even if our family was stronger, I would still call him brother Han. Yes, he had amazing personal charm. Was the boss very good back then?" Instructor Liu asked curiously. "Yes, he used to be very outgoing, he was righteous and fastidious, like a big brother, and he did things according to his nature and principles. If brother Han was young and vigorous then, he is now more stable after getting married. I couldn't describe my feeling in detail, but I can feel his growing strength hidden under his stable and peaceful appearance." Shan Chengqing sighed with emotion. Zhang Han's hideous power under the peaceful appearance was for his family was his treasure, and those who dared to harm them would be wiped out immediately by him. This was the brother Han Shan Chengqing was familiar with. Then Shan Chengqing looked at Zhao Feng and asked, "Are you brother Han's disciple, a real disciple?" "Of course." Instructor Liu replied enviously, "He is the first and only disciple of our boss. At ordinary times, Zhao Feng manages the boss's assets, companies, crops, livestock and everything just like his housekeeper. It's my luck to meet my master by chance. My master saved my life, taught me how to cultivate and turned me from an ordinary person to a martial art grandmaster in half a year, which was like a dream." Zhao Feng said with emotion as he drove, "It took you only half a year to become a martial art grandmaster?" Shan Chengqing was surprised and looked at Zhao Feng in confusion. Even with the King Dragon blood, he didn't reach the stage of grandmaster as quickly as Zhao Feng. "It's not just me, there is a Meng security group in our company, and all its 100 members are trained and taught by my master. Among them, there are 6 martial art grandmasters, 72 heaven stage masters and a few earth stage masters with poor aptitude." Zhao Feng replied calmly. Emperor King wouldn't be interested in them and their strength, so Zhao Feng dared to tell him all this information. Zhao Feng knew that martial artists at the Divine Realm all had their own soul sense, which helped them to estimate the other's strength whenever they liked. Besides, Shan Chengqing was Zhang Han's brother, and it was unnecessary for Zhao Feng to keep something secret from him. Zhao Feng didn't know that Emperor King was stunned at his words. "Really?" asked Shan Chengqing. He was a little surprised. Zhang Han cultivated 100 martial artists in half a year, among which there were 6 martial art grandmaster and many heaven stage and earth stage masters. Who could believe that? If this was known by the other big families, their eyes would be red with envy. The value of these 100 martial artists was very high, and even most big families, including the Chen family, didn't have so many martial artists. Only the strength of some long-standing sects could reach this level. Such an amazing security group was trained by Han in half a year. Why? Shan Chengqing was confused. Zhao Feng and Instructor Liu felt so proud when they saw Shan Chengqing's expression.
Zhao Feng explained, because my master's cultivation methods, body training methods and martial arts resources are amazing. Yes. Instructor Liu echoed, the boss has taught us at least 80 kinds of cultivation methods, which are tailored for everyone's physique. No one can be compared with him because he has countless cultivation methods. Cultivation methods. Chen Qingqing said slowly, importantly cultivation methods, body training methods and sufficient martial arts resources allow you to make quick breakthroughs. It seems that Brother Han has at least one kind of divine object. This. Zhao Feng hesitated, shook his head and said, we can't tell you more. Yes, we can't tell you more. If you want to know more about it, you'd better wait for the boss to tell you in person. Instructor Liu also responded with a smile. Why? Chen Qingqing said in surprise. Does Brother Han have more than one divine objects? His reaction was quick, and he was acutely aware of something from the expressions of Instructor Liu and Zhao Feng. Originally, he thought that Zhang Han had a divine object and a holy object, but he saw the expression of the two people in front of him. Chen Qingqing was shocked. Does he have more than one divine object? It seems that Brother Han also has a big secret. Chen Qingqing's eyes lit up. His Brother Han didn't change at all. Chen Qingqing was a little surprised because he didn't expect Brother Han to be so powerful. He felt happy for Zhang Han. While they were talking, the motorcade arrived at the Chen family. The Chen family's large-scale manor was located in the heart of the eastern part of Shangjing, in the middle of downtown, next to a villa area, surrounded by low buildings. There were no high-rise buildings in the area with a radius of 1 kilometer. This was a very high-end manor with all kinds of buildings and facilities in it, including the race course, golf course, open-air swimming pool, ancient and modern buildings and so on, showing the strength of Chen family. The warlord of Chan clan gave the Chen family a high position. It was Zhang Wangyu who helped the Zhang family to surpass the Chen family. After all, no one had the same amazing identity as Zhang Wangyu, who was the Prince of Heavenly Knights sect just like Zhang Han. It could also be deduced how high Muge's position was, as so few martial artists dared to provoke her. Zhang Han was an exception. Zhang Han didn't know his father's identity at the beginning, so even Ziyan didn't know why Zhang Han was so confident. What is a cultivator? Zhang Han is now at the foundation late stage, and he seems to be powerful enough. What about the innateness stage? The elixir stage? And all the following stages until he reaches the past tribulation stage? Ziyan just knew that her husband was once a powerful cultivator at the 9th level of past tribulation stage. But she didn't know what it meant. Only Zhang Han himself knew the 9th level of the past tribulation stage. When the motorcade arrived at the parking lot of the Chen family, they saw a large group of people standing on the edge of the parking lot. There were in total 16 or 17 people, including Patriarch Chen and many core family members. They all seemed to be very enthusiastic and excited. Even Patriarch Chen often rubbed his hands. They are coming. They were cheered up by the motorcade. Zhang Han Yang was Chen Qingqing's brother, and his arrival motivated everyone in the Chen family. They were all busy preparing to treat these distinguished guests at the highest standard. Bang bang bang. With the sounds of doors being opened and closed, everyone got out under the Chen's gaze. Patriarch, this is my brother Han, Zhang Han or Zhang Han Yang, this is Ziyan, my sister-in-law Ziyan, and this is their daughter Meng Meng. Nice to meet you, Mr. Zhang, Miss Ziyan, lovely Meng Meng. Patriarch Chen greeted everyone warmly, including Meng Meng. Meng Meng was a little embarrassed. She hid by Zhang Han's leg and waved her little palm. Hello, uncle. Uncle? Patriarch Chen, who was in his 50s, was surprised and touched his beard. I like it, ha ha, I feel much younger now. Please excuse her words. Ziyan smiled. Meng Meng didn't know much about how to call her elders because Ziyan didn't teach her too much about it. The most important reason was that the little girl seldom had contact with strangers before. This is Rong Jiaxin, Brother Han's aunt. This is Wang Ming, her husband.
This is. Cheng Chengqing introduced Zhang Han's family members and friends one by one. Therefore, they stood at the edge of the parking lot for 5 minutes before they walked to the restaurant to the warm welcome of all the Chen family members. All the Chens regarded the dinner today as a milestone. Emperor Qing ruled this era with his strength. But they also admitted that this was the era of Zhang Han Yang, merciless Zhang. With their relationship, the Chen family's position will be as solid as gold. This was something they would love to see. Chapter 634, A Battle Above the North Sea. The restaurant of the Chen family had 3 floors, the most luxurious of which was an open-air restaurant above the 3rd floor. The Chen's banquets were usually held on the 1st and 2nd floors, and the 3rd floor was only opened during the Spring Festival and several important festivals. As for the most luxurious open-air restaurant above the 3rd floor, it belonged to the warlord of Chan clan and was only opened every time he returned. The dining room was decorated like a palace, and the floor was inlaid with gold. Every step on it would wear the pattern on the ground, so only some professional servants were responsible for cleaning the room. As the warlord of Chan clan grew older, he got bored with eating in such a luxurious place. Instead, he preferred to have a meal in the courtyard on the small island in the North Sea. Mr. Zhang, Miss Zi, please go upstairs. Patriarch Chen had been staying by them and looking at them excitedly. He was so overjoyed that it was like he was going to get married. On the stairs up the 3rd floor, Patriarch Chen made a gesture. However, when they arrived at the dining room on the roof, seeing the golden floor, Wang Ming was stunned. Should we wear shoe covers? He saw a shoe cabinet nearby with shoe covers hanging in it. No. Patriarch Chen shook his head and said with a smile, they are shoe covers used by the staff in charge of cleaning. So they went directly to the roof. It was like an air garden, luxurious, fresh and gorgeous. There were rectangular dining tables in the restaurant. A bottle of red wine and a dozen bottles of classic white wine are placed on the table. The value of the wine was more than 10 million yuan, let alone the variety of expensive top-grade food materials prepared by the Chen family. When this group of people walked up all the way, they saw some young generations of the Chen family and their friends invited to have dinner together on the 1st floor and the 2nd floor. When they saw this group of people, they couldn't help being surprised. When the group of guests passed by, these Chen family members and their friends kept silent, and the whole restaurant was very quiet. But when Zhang Han and his friends left the 3rd floor, the others began to discuss about them. Our patriarch looks like a eunuch following the emperor. Well, he looks very enthusiastic. It's not just enthusiasm, he didn't laugh like this even when his grandson was born. You know nothing about it at all. Don't you see Zhang Han next to our patriarch? He is as famous as our brother Chengqing. He's super powerful and even more powerful than brother Chengqing. Really? Though Zhang Han Yang is brother Chengqing's elder brother, I've heard that brother Chengqing has made a great breakthrough, which makes him better than Zhang Han Yang. Ah, you don't understand what I said. Look at the woman standing beside Zhang Han Yang. She is Xian, the goddess. She is as pretty as the figures in fairy tales. So is their daughter, and I like her very much. It's amazing for Zhang Han Yang to marry Xian. There is no second Xian in the world. Everyone around that guy was speechless. Okay, do you judge their strength through their girlfriends? The arrival of Zhang Han and his friends excited the younger generation of the Chen family. It seems that they are going to live here. Brother Chengqing has arranged many rooms for them. Can we ask Sister Xian for her autographed picture? They were all thinking about it. Young people were different from the older generation, who regarded today as a milestone. They just wanted to take a picture with Xian and ask for her signature. Wait. A man in the crowd was stunned and bewildered, and his eyes were full of doubt. That little girl just now seems to be the beautiful little girl in the video of Brother Dong's live broadcast. Those who had seen Sun Donging's live broadcast beside him confirmed his conjecture. Now they wanted to take photos with Meng Meng. If allowed, they would also like to go to the dinner party. It was a pity that all the people who could go upstairs had important positions in the Chen family. It was at dusk, and the sun setting in the west spread its soft afterglow all over the earth, making the atmosphere in Chen's open-air restaurant warmer. After everyone sat down, some waiters came up with fruit and snacks. The crowd chatted happily for 5 minutes before the dishes were served. Just at this moment, "Here comes my grandfather." Shen Qingqing looked up at the sky. The warlord of Chan clan and Gai Xingkong were behind a light dark cloud. They wanted to land directly, but when Zhang Han saw them, his right index finger moved. Buzz! The dark cloud trembled. The two who received the signal were stunned. The warlord of Chan clan was speechless. "Is this your home or my home?" He didn't say anything, but landed on the front of the restaurant and walked upstairs with Gai Xingkong, elder. Patriarch Chen and other members all said hello, and then turned their gaze to Gai Xingkong. "Mr. Gai." They greeted him politely. "Hello." Gai Xingkong smiled and nodded. "Sit down, please." Patriarch Chen arranged 2 seats beside him. Gai Xingkong and the warlord of Chan clan, Shen Qingqing and Zhang Han sat on one side. At this time, the dishes were almost ready. In addition to Quenjude's roast duck, Washan roast fish and other classic dishes, there were many special dishes. The conversation was much quieter when they ate. Zhang Han seldom talked with others, because he had been focusing on serving Meng food. The pork joint stewed with rock sugar is a famous dish in Tan's series. It's red and bright in color, crisp yet with tender flesh, and good in taste. It's very fragrant, especially the skin. It's said that it can beautify your skin, and you can eat more. Zhang Han took a piece of the pork with only a little thin meat and more skin, and put it into Meng's cute small bowl. Then he moved his chopsticks to serve Xian a large piece of pork. The guests at such a party were usually gentle. They didn't eat too much on this occasion. It was about the conversation, the wine, which enhanced feelings and business. But after living with Zhang Han, Xian found that the unwritten rules before were pointless. With the support of a strong power, there was no need for these false rules at all. Like now, Zhang Han served food to his wife and daughter, which made them very happy and encouraged others to serve food to their wives in the same way. They found their long-lost intimacy, which made the atmosphere in the restaurant warmer, delicious, sweet and fragrant. Meng's small hand was holding a pair of long chopsticks. She was enjoying the dishes Zhang Han served her while mumbling, "I'll make it for you myself when we get back to Hong Kong." Zhang Han smiled. Zhang Han didn't move his chopsticks frequently. When Meng finished eating, he picked up a small spoon and served her another kind of dish. At the same time, he introduced, "This is crab incurred, a kind of Beijing cuisine. It uses South bean curd." Every time Meng finished eating, Zhang Han would serve her another kind of dish. Zhang Han's performance at the dinner table never changed. He never cared about the occasion and rules of eating. He just wanted his lovely daughter to enjoy the food. Try this fried Chinese tuna and fish. Try the sea cucumber and dremella. When other people were chatting, they would occasionally look at Zhang Han's side. Many of them also thought of their children when they were young and missed that period of time so much. Meng should be the child growing up in the greenhouse. Finally, have some royal yellow cake. Zhang Han had been looking for the most suitable food on the table for Meng. There were about 50 dishes, and Meng was full before she could try every dish. Luckily, Zhang Han was born and raised in the capital city and he knew which was the special dish, so he cleverly avoided the common dishes in the process of feeding Meng. The last imperial yellow cake was a little far away from Zhang Han. But just after Zhang Han's introduction, the others quickly passed the dish to him. Zhang Han gave Meng a piece of the cake. After Meng finished eating the yellow cake, she put down her chopsticks and looked up at Zhang Han. "Papa, I'm full." "Okay." Zhang Han smiled and thought that Meng had enough to eat, so he took a tissue from the side and rubbed her greasy lips. "I'm full, too." Seeing Meng Meng looking at the sofa behind her with her bright eyes, Xian wiped her lips and asked, Meng Meng, do you want to play there? Yes. Meng Meng's eyes lit up, I want to play with the toys there. Go with her. Zhang Han touched Meng Meng's head. Xian sat down with Meng Meng on the sofa and took out two small toys from her bag to let Meng Meng play. Zhang Han looked at them for a while, then turned his gaze to the table. Chen Qingqing smiled and said, Brother Han, you can do everything more quickly than others. Now I've just finished cultivating, and your daughter has grown up to be a girl. She is so cute that I even want to have a daughter of my own. Zhang Han pondered, and finally gave a positive answer, your life will be different with children. It seems that the whole world is yours before your children are born, and then you want to give the whole world to her, and of course, your wife. What Mr. Zhang said is reasonable, it's true, Qingqing, you are 26 now and mature enough to marry a girl. Patriarch Chen laughed. Me, I'm not in a hurry, we have longevity as martial artists, but my wife and children will turn into dead bones quicker than me. Chen Qingqing shook his head. The warlord of Chan clan slightly nodded his head, because what Chen Qingqing said was the truth. But Zhang Han disagreed with him. You say that because you are still incompetent, if you have enough strength, your family, including your wife and daughter, can live forever. Bang! The hand of warlord of Chan clan slightly shook as he gave Zhang Han a dissatisfied look. Why am I so reluctant to listen to you? Am I that kind of incompetent person? Instead of expressing his dissatisfaction, he said meaningfully, longevity is such a sacred word. In this world, maybe only gods can live forever. They live with the sun, the moon, the heaven and the earth. I haven't seen such gods in these years. Yes, the lifespan of martial artists at the divine realm is only 300 to 500 years, and we will eventually die. Gai Xingkong also said with emotion, it may be the law of nature that man dies. Chen Qingqing said. When the powerful martial artists were chatting, the others quieted down and listened to them attentively. The three God State Masters at the scene all agreed that their lifespans had an end. However, just after they finished, Zhang Han took a sip of red wine, chuckled and said slowly, I don't know if you've seen such news. Some people say that there are both two-dimensional and three-dimensional spaces in the world. What is beyond the universe? What if so many planets are just parasites on the body of a giant, and we human beings are just bacteria on a parasite? The theory is quite interesting, but it's also true that the universe is boundless and the earth is very small. As he spoke, Zhang Han looked at the setting sun and found that the night had come. Zhang Han's voice softened, we can live forever if we manage to obtain a method to be immortal. The warlord of Chan clan, Gai Xingkong and Chen Qingqing were all stunned at his words. They thought that Grand Master was stronger than Chi Strength Master, Divine Realm Master was stronger than Grand Master, and Earth Realm Master and Heaven Realm Master were stronger than Divine Realm Master, but the Heaven Realm was not the peak since there was no end to cultivating. Maybe their vision was really narrow. The warlord of Chan clan slightly narrowed his eyes as he looked at Zhang Han in surprise. He dared not to guess the meaning of Zhang Han's words. After all, immortals only appeared in legends. They chatted for a long time. Zhang Han checked the time and found that it was already 8 o'clock in the evening. Meng Meng was a little tired now, so he took a glass of red wine and looked at Chen Qingqing. Ding! They clinked and Zhang Han said after taking a sip, we seem to be quite close to the North Sea. Yes, what's the matter? Chen Qingqing was confused. Wait for me in the middle of North Sea at 11:15 tonight. Zhang Han smiled and turned away. He picked up Meng Meng and went back to the villa with Xian, Rong Jiaxin, Zhang Li, Zhao Feng, Instructor Liu and others followed him in leaving. A few people, including Wang Zanping and Wang Zanzong, didn't move. After Zhang Han left the dining room, those remaining in the room looked at each other in confusion. What does he mean? At 11:15 tonight, in the middle of North Sea? Will he hiss? They were clever enough to guess the truth. So they all gasped in astonishment. Zhang Han Yang is going to fight against Emperor King. What an interesting young man. The warlord of Chan clan's eyes lit up. He chuckled and said, Chen King, your brother Han wants to compete with you. Try your best tonight and show him the Chen family's power. In this case, the warlord of Chan clan did not take Zhang Han as a junior, but as the Prince of Heavenly Knights sect. Elder Chen, it's a little early for you to say that. It's not certain who will win the battle. Gai Xingkong smiled mysteriously. Yes. Wang Zanping was looking forward to the fight tonight. He clapped excitedly and said, Han knows everything. Don't look down on him. Then I'll try my best to compete with Brother Han this evening. Chen Qingqing shook his head slightly, and his eyes were full of excitement. He also wanted to see what high stage Brother Han's cultivation had reached. So they all looked forward to the night. Instead of going back to rest, they decided to drink here until 11 p.m. After another hour's sitting, Patriarch Chen and some other members felt tired. They were curious about the battle, but they didn't plan to watch it, so they went back to rest. 10 o'clock in the evening. The warlord of Chan clan, Gai Xingkong, Chen Qingqing, Wang Zanping, Wang Zanzong, Wang Ming, Rong Jiaxin, Zhao Feng, Instructor Liu and Xuyong all took the lead in going to the North Sea. Leng didn't go with them because she believed that Zhang Han was invincible. In addition, everyone went to watch the battle, leaving no martial artist here to guard Xian and Meng Meng except for her. If she knew that Zhang Han could return through a special portal in a critical moment, she might also go to watch the battle. At 10 o'clock, Zhang Han began to tell stories as usual. After about 10 minutes, Meng Meng fell asleep. Xian took the lead in getting out of bed in her pajamas, gave Zhang Han his coat, and said softly, "Go have fun, I'll play with my cell phone, watch a movie and go to bed when you come back." "Okay." Zhang Han nodded. He held Xian's delicate cheeks in both hands, kissed her red lips, and then flew out of the window. The North Sea in the night had a unique beauty. Although it looked like the sea, it was just an inland lake. At this time, in the middle of the North Sea, a large group of people stood on the edge of the island where the warlord of Chan clan usually lived. They were all here to watch the battle. Chen Qingqing was standing in the air 100 meters away from the front, facing the curved moon. He was adjusting his breathing, and everyone could see his calm expression. He would face the challenge of Zhang Han in his best condition. "It's 11 p.m. Instructor Liu checked the time and announced excitedly, "The boss will be here in less than 15 minutes. The warlord of Chan clan looked up at the sky in the distance and said, "He is coming." Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Everyone turned to look in that direction. They were all stunned when they saw Zhang Han clearly. Zhang Han seemed to have turned into a dark shadow in the distance. It was amazing how fast he was. Every step he took, his figure would move 100 meters forward. In 3 breaths, he came to the place near the island from afar. He was also suspended in the air, facing Chen Qingqing. With this speed alone, he is better than many of the martial artists at the first level of Divine Realm stage. The warlord of Chan clan could not help sighing. Zhang Wengyu's son is really a talented martial artist. He is coming. Everyone cheered up and tried to open their eyes as widely as they could. They wanted to watch the battle carefully. At the same time, Chen Qingqing also opened his eyes and there was a flash of green light in his eyes. He slowly turned around and looked at Zhang Han. "Brother Han, I have been cultivating for 10 years, and I dare not slack off. I have fought hundreds of battles and never failed. Besides, I have the King Dragon blood and my strength is beyond many people's imagination, though I have just made use of 30% of the blood. As for you, Brother Han, your spiritual sense mind trick is stronger than my grandfather, and I have never seen anyone like you, but you haven't reached the Divine Realm yet. Why not delay this battle until you reach that stage?" Chapter 635, An Amazing Battle. What Chen Qingqing said was true. Only when martial artists advanced to the Divine Realm could they understand the gap between the Divine Realm and the martial art Grand Master. They could feel that Chi Strength Master and Martial Arts Grandmaster were just the entry levels. When they advanced to the divine realm, there would be changes within them. The most distinctive change was that their perception of heaven and earth would become deeper, as if they could use the power of heaven and earth at will. They would have the spiritual sense-mind trick, and the ability to know what they should do before they made a plan. Besides, they could use the minimum amount of energy while forming the most powerful attack. Whether it was their sustained combat capability or other abilities, they would change a lot. They were just mortals before they reached the divine realm, and after that they would be reborn. This was a new starting point. As Zhang Han said, they would always be mortal if they failed to reach the innateness stage. In some aspects, innateness stage was equal to the divine realm. They were essentially the same, but there were still some subtle differences. Everyone knew that there was a big gap between Zhang Han and Chen Qing's stage, but they didn't expect Zhang Han to remain resolute in the face of this situation. Chen Qing, don't be too proud of yourself at the divine realm. In fact, the divine realm is just a beginning. Zhang Han sighed. Really? There seemed to be a rolling thunder in Chen Qing's body. He stretched his right hand and immediately felt the invisible energy converging on his arm. He said, I not only have made a perfect breakthrough to the divine realm, but also have got the king dragon blood. To put it simply, I can punch a hole in a mountain with the power of Azure Dragon. Fine, I'll show you real strength. Zhang Han replied. Zhang Han's eyes glittered as he was drawing circles in the air with his hand. At this moment, the others present clearly sensed the miraculous power converging on Zhang Han's right hand. Zhang Han was glowing as he activated the miraculous power, which was actually his spiritual force, with his 10 inches Danshan. Bang! Zhang Han rushed at Chen Qing with supersonic speed. With Zhang Han's fist, there was a terrifying sound of thunder in the air. At this moment, everyone around was a little surprised. They didn't expect Zhang Han to be the first to make a move. But what happened later shocked them. Great! Chen Qing laughed loudly, and he gathered the strength of Azure Dragon with his right arm. In the minds of all people, there seemed to be a faint shadow of a dragon around Chen Qing's right arm. He rushed forward and punched Zhang Han head-on. He only used 50% of his strength in order not to hurt Zhang Han. Boom! At the intersection of the two fists, a crackling and shocking sound erupted. The sound rolled and spread in all directions, as if the heaven and the earth were shaking. The fists of Zhang Han and Chen Qing were opposite each other. There was a distance of 10 meters between, and their fists did not actually touch each other. However, the energy of their fists was converging, spinning around them and turning into a gale. The clothes of the two of them were rattling. I only gave it 50% of my effort, and you? Chen Qing had a small smile on his lips. 30%. Zhang Han's eyes narrowed slightly. Chen Qing, who was proud, was frozen by Zhang Han's words. He wanted to refute this, but he knew that Zhang Han never bothered to lie about these things. But others didn't think so. 30%? Is that a little low? Tannen wiped his forehead and thought that 70% was more reasonable. It's a little exaggerated. The warlord of Chan clan sighed and doubted silently, is Zhang Han a man with a strong sense of vanity? Before he had finished thinking, there was a convenient change, which made him speechless and widened his eyes. What's this move? The warlord of Chan clan was astonished. Hiss. Gai Xingkong gasped in fear and cried out, it's beyond logic and above reason. How far has Han come? The other martial artists were all stunned. Obviously, they saw something incredible. At the moment when Zhang Han finished speaking, he pushed his left hand up and then down. Clatter. It sounded like rain. For a moment, within a radius of 100 meters around Zhang Han and Chen Qing, beautiful lights flickered, as if they were in the starry sky, but the starry vision was made by Zhang Han. It's as if the whole starry sky belonged to Zhang Han. The starry vision was full of the power of starlight, which was the power deposited in heaven and earth. Zhang Han's use of the power of heaven and earth, especially the power of such majestic starlight, was inconceivable in the eyes of the warlord of Chan clan. All the star energy, like a super energy storm, constantly converged in Zhang Han's right arm, making the energy of his punch like that of the mighty sea. Chen Qinking's body was forced back by 5 meters. He hurried to use the strength of Azure Dragon to resist. He didn't dare to spare any effort at all, because even if he put it into full strength, he felt that he could not resist Zhang Han's attack for long. He just expected that the energy storm would pass a little faster. At the same time of resistance, Chen Qiking couldn't help asking, "What's this move? It's unheard of." Yes, this move seemed even inconceivable to the warlord of Chan clan. Zhang Han smiled at Chen Qiking without saying anything. 2 seconds later, Zhang Han shook his right hand, turning all the star power into a light outline of fist and punched at Chen Qiking. Boom! A dull sound came out, and Chen Qiking retreated uncontrollably for more than 100 feet. He heard Zhang Han's calm tone, "I call it star-shaking punch." Zhang Han paused, and then said something that made everyone uneasy. "For now I can only use 10% to 20% of its power. When I make a breakthrough and am able to activate more power of the stars, you won't be able to resist my punch anymore." This. Chen Qiking slightly narrowed his eyes in astonishment. He was surprised at Zhang Han's strength. As for the warlord of Chan clan and others at the edge of the island, they were all stunned. If he advances into the divine realm and uses this move again, it's possible that he will defeat Chen King. The warlord of Chan clan said seriously. He never thought that Zhang Han could perform such an amazing move. Tanan and Wang Zanping's face changed several times and finally they sighed with emotion. Han knows so many unique skills. Elder Chen, you will understand it if you have contact with him more frequently. He is like a reborn immortal. What he knows is amazing. Yes. Wang Zanping added, Elder Chen, you don't know that Han's array skills are amazing. We haven't understood the 100 formation image that he made for us after several months of studying it. Moreover, Han knows how to make pills, and his success rate is nearly 100%, while the number of cauldron failures are very few. I really don't know if there is anything he can't do. He accompanies Meng Meng every day. At first, you may think he is short-sighted, but with in-depth contact, you will find that he is back to nature. Wang Zanzong said with emotion. It's not. Zhao Feng couldn't help saying, last time I heard my master said that he cultivated every day to suppress his strength, which was about the spiritual sense-mind trick. What are you saying? The warlord of Chan clan was shocked. He took a look at Zhao Feng and Zhang Han with astonishment in his eyes. It seems that his spiritual sense-mind trick has surpassed me and is likely to reach the level of Earth Realm. Is his spiritual sense-mind trick still being suppressed? What is he waiting for? The warlord of Chan clan was thinking about it. He realized that Chen Qingqing couldn't win the battle. He began to doubt. As for Emperor King, he was so excited now. Brother Han, I was so surprised by your fist. I didn't expect that your strength was beyond my expectations. You are the first one in the recent 100 years to challenge a man at God Realm medium stage as a Grand Master. I will try my best. Do you think it's okay? He was worried that Zhang Han would be hurt by his poor control of his strength, so he asked Zhang Han for permission in advance. Why not? Zhang Han burst out laughing and everyone felt the frightening chi surrounding him. His voice seemed to come from the sky. Chen King, I haven't used all my strength since I became famous. If you can force me to fight with all my strength, you can be proud of yourself in the martial arts world. Everyone felt Zhang Han's pride in this sentence. They knew that this was Zhang Han's unique pride. Even Chen Qiking felt it. The green light in his eyes made him look like a god floating in the air. This is called Azure Dragon Wagging Tail. Chen Qiking made a gesture of casting with his hands and shouted, the backflow of the North Sea under his feet, combined with the spirit within the radius of 100 feet and the powerful spiritual force and soul sense in his body, then converged into a huge dragon with a length of 100 feet under the effect of the secret method. Kaboom! The heavy sound pressed on the heartstrings of onlookers, and the huge water dragon was like half of Mount Tai pressing against Zhang Han. In the middle of the air, the water dragon jerked its tail with extreme speed and stealthily broke through the sound barrier, forming a violent whistling sound. It's a good move. Zhang Han looked at Chen Qingqing's move and nodded his head, but it's still not enough to deal with me. I'll resist your move with 4 symbols formation and black tortoise formation. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Zhang Han summoned all his 18 cards. Then he began making the 4 symbols formation with his spiritual sense energy. The 4 symbols formation were changeable, and Zhang Han had once used black tortoise formation as a defensive method to resist spiritual force attacks. Now that the azure dragon wagging tail was a kind of soul sense attack, Zhang Han decided to use the corresponding defensive methods. That was the black tortoise formation. Buzz! The 18 cards were linked with each other by an invisible force. The 4 symbols formation was formed. The soul of the flood dragon turned into a green glow, which began surrounding the golden black tortoise to form a black tortoise formation. A pale golden glow turned into a turtle shell with clear lines, and rushed at Chen Qingqing's azure dragon wagging tail. Bang! There was a strong tremor throughout the island. Everyone's soul was shaking. The duel of the 2 moves was also the duel of spiritual sense mind trick. It seemed that no one won this round. But when Chen Qingqing's azure dragon wagging tail disappeared, the others could still see Zhang Han's 4 symbols formation. Chen Qingqing sighed. I shouldn't have used azure dragon wagging tail because I forgot that your spiritual sense mind trick is amazing. However, you can't perform more powerful moves with your spiritual sense mind trick, right? Maybe. Zhang Han replied and quickly moved his fingers. You'd better resist my 4 symbols formation first. 4 symbols formation. Dragon in the ice sea. Clatter. Everyone seemed to hear the sound of the current. When they looked around, they found that the tortoise shell had changed in an instant. It was now covered by a blue light and looked like a water source with a waterfall flowing down. The souls of flood dragon seemed to be flying in the clouds and shuttling constantly. Chen Qingqing smiled when he saw this. It's so easy to break it. Dragon roar. With Chen Qingqing making a strange gesture with his hands, a huge amount of soul sense began to flow, and gathered to form the outline of a huge dragon head above his head. The outline of this huge dragon's head was very clear. Taking a look at the flood dragon scornfully, it suddenly opened its bloody mouth. Ow! A dragon roar spread in all directions, and even Zhang Han's soul sense sea was shaken. Bang! The T-wood thunder above his soul sense sea was woken up, and Zhang Han hurriedly suppressed it. Then he saw his flood dragon retreat like a mouse facing a cat. It was almost shaken into pieces by the dragon roar. Zhang Han took back his 18 cards. In fact, he used the divine object, which was not fair for Chen Qingqing with no weapon. But Chen Qingqing was at the divine realm stage, and it was more unfair for Zhang Han to fight against him. Zhang Han was the dominant player in the 2 rounds of duels, which shocked everyone on the island, including the warlord of Chan clan. Zhang Han was just a grand master. It is amazing for him to surpass Qingqing with his ability and strength. The warlord of Chan clan said slowly, but there is still a large gap between the divine realm stage and grand master stage, and Qingqing is sure to win the battle. He hasn't used many of his skills. Your words make sense. Gai Xingkong was influenced by Elder Chen's words, but you don't know how many skills Han hasn't used yet, really? The warlord of Chan clan shook his head and smiled. Let's wait and see. Yes, let's wait and see. Brother Han, I'm going to be serious. Chen Qingqing's hands suddenly moved forward. 4 outlines of dragons swam out of his hands and grew larger and larger. King Ming Seal. Zhang Han broke up all the 4 dragons formed by Chen Qingqing's spiritual sense mind trick with his King Ming Seal before they could grow to be 10 meters in length. All right. Chen Qingqing felt depressed. I can't use my spiritual sense mind trick to deal with you. As your dragon shadow. Chen Qingqing roared, and his figure was divided into 4 parts, attacking Zhang Han from the front. However, before he could touch Zhang Han, duplication. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. More than 100 Zhang Han appeared in front of Chen Qingqing. When he scanned them with his mind, he found that every figure seemed to be real. Chen Qingqing couldn't control his trembling eyelids. The warlord of Chan clan was also trembling. Why are his moves so strange? The warlord of Chan clan was confused. In his eyes, each of Zhang Han's moves could be regarded as the most powerful one by ordinary martial artists. Chen Qingqing was helpless and summoned a soft sword. It was a divine weapon. Of course, the divine weapon once belonged to the warlord of Chan clan. Brother Han, you even forced me to use my unpredictable shadow sword. I have lost this battle, but I still want to try your limits. Sky-crossing sword. Chen Qingqing swept his sword and it was shining in the sky, just like lightning, illuminating the nearby area instantly. Chen Qingqing used only 30% of his strength while making this move. He was at the divine realm and felt that it was enough. Qingqing, you made a mistake again by using a sword in front of me. Zhang Han sighed and laughed. The 99 fake figures of him disappeared and the real Zhang Han jumped up to dodge the sword when it was about to approach him. At the same time, a long black sword appeared in his right hand. It was Demon Dancing Sword. The cultivator is drunk on the essence of flowers. His sword can deter the whole world. Zhang Han swept his sword from sky to the ground. What everyone on the ground saw was a huge green light falling from the sky. Ha ha ha, good. The chi of Azure Dragon Sword. Chen Qingqing waved his soft sword with 50% of his strength. However, he only managed to resist Zhang Han's move with 50% strength, and couldn't fight back anymore. The two attacks collided with each other, making a thunder-like noise. There was an explosion in the sky, which caused a strong wind nearby and made the waves on the water roll. What a fierce sword move, great. Chen Qingqing laughed and continued to attack with his sword. Each of his moves was fiercer and more complicated than the last one. At the same time, he made several unique moves of King Dragon Blood. Zhang Han was forced to step back. It was not that Zhang Han didn't use all his strength, but even if he performed the most powerful sword move that he could use now, he would still be suppressed all the way by Emperor King, who attacked with all his strength. People on the beachside were stunned at their battle. For them, it was a fierce battle. They could learn a lot from it. Emperor King was a powerful martial artist at God Realm medium stage, while Zhang Han was at Grandmaster peak. It was unbelievable that a Grandmaster could fight in this way with someone at God Realm medium stage. Zhang Han kept retreating under everyone's gaze. Chen Qingqing kept using all his strength until Zhang Han had retreated several hundred meters. Then he sighed with emotion. Brother Han, I didn't expect your sword to be so fierce. Really? Zhang Han remained calm while stepping back. Hearing Chen Qingqing's words, he paused for a while and then said, my sword is for killing people, and that's why I only perform simple but fierce moves with it. Are you serious? Chen Qingqing slightly narrowed his eyes. He always believed Zhang Han. But Zhang Han's words were too shocking. Maybe you can see it one day in the future, not now. Zhang Han took Demon Dancing Sword back and shook his head. I didn't expect that I couldn't defeat you with these sword moves. When Chen Qingqing saw this, he thought Zhang Han was going to stop, so he also stopped and looked at Zhang Han from 10 meters away. With the power of Divine Realm and the help of unpredictable Shadow Sword, the divine weapon, I made a great effort to suppress you. I can see how shocked my grandfather is from his facial expression. Chen Qingqing forced a smile. Ha ha, the battle is not over. Zhang Han gave him a meaningful smile. I have another divine weapon called Roaring Flame Saber, and I got it after killing Gudong. One of his moves is called Water Cutting Saber, which means that this saber can even cut the water flow.
But he couldn't make the most of this move with his poor saber skills. All of a sudden, roaring flame saber appeared in Zhang Han's right hand along with a hot wave. Zhang Han said calmly, I happen to know a saber move, with which I can cut a river. I'm going to show you the real water-cutting saber. Bang! A dazzling red light rushed at Chen Qingqing through the sky. Chapter 636, Advice. Seeing this extremely dazzling red light, everyone at the far end of the beach gasped, Master is invincible. Zhao Feng's heart was racing, and his whole body was trembling. He thought that if he advanced into the Grand Master realm, he would then be able to see the gap between him and his master. However, it seemed that he not only had failed to see the gap, but he was also falling further and further behind his master. Zhao Feng then realized how powerful his master was as a cultivator. Gai Xingkong, the warlord of Chan clan, was the most shocked there because he and Zhao Feng were the only two that could feel how powerful Zhang Han's strike was. It was unprecedentedly powerful. It was, until now, the most powerful strike during tonight's fight. In everyone's gaze, the huge illusion of a knife fell down from the sky, falling onto the water between Zhang Han and Chen Qingqing. Clatter. The water in the middle of the North Sea was more than 10 meters deep, and it seemed the illusion of the knife had totally divided the water into two halves. A 100 feet long path was then revealed. The illusion carried its own momentum and continued to slash downward, cutting a 10-meter deep gully on the seabed. Instructor Liu and the others were stunned by what they saw. Damn it! Boss is going to cut the North Sea into two halves. His power is so overwhelming. That's really impressive. That's what they call cutting the water. It's so formidable. That's the next level of Gudong Glai's water-cutting saber. Gai Xingkong's felt cold on his teeth as he exclaimed, that strike would be too much to take, even for me. I didn't expect that Zhang Han would be so good at wielding the saber too. If Guan Yu hears about this, he will be overjoyed. The warlord of Chan clan paused for a second when he heard that. Then he said, I'm surprised at how many weapons he is able to use. Where did he learn that impressive saber skill? Every move of his was so unique and powerful. They wondered how Zhang Han knew so many skills. They felt as if he had learned how to cultivate even while he was a newborn baby. They had every reason to be astonished. It is a pity that it was water that he slashed on. If he slashed Emperor King, the powerful man would have been in a panic, too. Wang Zanping nodded his head and said. Other people also nodded and agreed with him. However, out of a sudden, those people seemed to have felt something. Everyone, besides Chen Qingqing, had a change of expression on their faces. What kind of secret skill is that? The warlord of Chan clan's pupils shrank. The intensity of the strike stunned all of them, and it didn't seem to be over. Chen Qingqing then spoke out the thoughts in people's minds. He exclaimed in surprise, he hasn't finished yet. Upon hearing that, Zhang Han smiled and said, that was just a beginning. Today is not your day to test my limits, it is my day to test yours. As Zhang Han spoke, boom, they saw the fresh gully filled with water again. At the same time, a strong aura spread out between heaven and earth. The surface of the water suddenly dropped down, something horrible was coming out of it. Buzz. Along with muffled sounds, a huge wave rose more than 100 feet above the sea. Chen Qingqing looked so tiny standing in front of the giant wave. This was just the beginning. The waves were surging, and people were clamoring. Just then, Zhang Han said peacefully, Shangqing, the divine realm is no more than the beginning. The world is far bigger than you could ever imagine. Laying out a solid foundation for cultivation is the priority of all. I can advance into the divine realm today if I want to. I'm here today to test your foundation. Now, try your best. Boom. Zhang Han's words shocked many people. He said he could advance into the divine realm today if he wanted to. That sounded as easy as drinking water. But before they could think about it, they were attracted by what was happening in front of them. Foo. In an instant, the giant wave turned into thousands of sabers, approaching Chen Qingqing from all directions. This.
Chen Qingqing exclaimed with a grim look. He was indeed very stressed when he was facing overwhelming water sabers. He grabbed the unpredictable shadow sword tighter and said in a low voice, "It's very strong, but it's not enough." Swish. Within a blink, Chen Qingqing waved his soft sword 36 times. 36 swords chi went outwards in all directions. Rumbling, the sky grew unsteady as if it had been indiscriminately blown up by thousands of bombs. The 36 streaks of sword chi from Chen Qingqing looked very aggressive. They broke those water sabers one by one. However, the water sabers were too numerous. "I didn't expect that Qingqing would use that move," the warlord of Chan clan exclaimed. He had to perform the 36 swords, which meant that he is under lots of pressure from Zhang Han. "I can feel the great power contained in that move," said Gaik Xingkong, gaze locked on the 36 streaks of sword chi. The intensity of the power made his heart tremble. There was one thing that the warlord of Chan clan didn't tell other people. The 36 swords was Qingqing's trump card. He had concluded in his mind that Zhang Han would definitely be the winner today. The young man would win the fight quickly and perfectly, which was a shocking indication of his formidable power. Zhang Han had barely reached the divine realm yet and Chen Qingqing was already in the god realm medium stage. It was unbelievable that Zhang Han could withstand Chen Qingqing's attacks for so long. Qingqing has begun to play his trump card. Zhang Han had really impressed me, but I think there's still a gap between them, said the warlord of Chan clan. What a pity. Gaik Xingkong sighed as well. He admitted that Zhang Han was very talented, but he also insisted that Zhang Han would fail today. He could only win this fight if Emperor King wanted him to. "I think he has already been impressive enough." As Gaik Xingkong thought about it, he looked at Zhang Han and smiled. Then he thought to himself, the young guy is already impressive enough. The younger generation will surpass the older. Those onlookers were now in a complicated mood. They saw the overwhelming power rising. They saw the sword chi and water sabers consuming each other. On the road in front of the gate on the other side of Beihai Park, 3 cars pulled over. The leading one was a customized Volkswagen Beetle with a low chassis. The captain of the Vermilion Bird detachment, Vermilion Bird, was sitting inside, along with the fat captain Black Tortoise. "I've been busy for a whole day. I'm really tired. There are tens of thousands of martial artists here and they created 19 criminal cases, which was still one less than the number we expected." Black Tortoise shook his head and said, "I have to eat more tripang in Bema restaurant to make up for my hard work. I haven't eaten or drunk anything since this morning. Humphrey, I haven't eaten anything, either. I'm starving." Jiang Yanlan snorted and blinked his eyes. "Our boss, Danlang, once told us that Zhang Han Yang's spiritual sense mind trick was extremely powerful. He is already so powerful before he advanced into the next realm. God knows how formidable he will be if he made it into the next realm." "Him? Ha!" Black Tortoise curled his lips and said, "He's an old evil goblin. Lanlan, listen to me. Maybe he's an ancient spirit that has possessed a young man's body. You stay away from him, or maybe he will eat you alive." He is now supported by the warlord of Chan clan, Gaik Xingkong, and Emperor King. Even Danlang doesn't want to mess with him. Jiang Yanlan seemed angry and said, "Who are you calling Lanlan? How dare you? Do you want me to beat you?" Hiss. Seeing the flames of anger in Jiang Yanlan's blue eyes, Black Tortoise was startled. No, I'm no one's opponent. It's just a slip of the tongue. Please don't be mad at me." He kept apologizing because he knew how scary Jiang Yanlan could be when she was angry. "Humphrey." The flames of anger in her eyes went out as she snorted. Then she hit the gas heavily. The car rushed away like it was flying. Buzz. The car rushed quickly on the road to the edge of the North Sea. An Audi A8L was following behind. Inside the car, Azure Dragon shook his head and said, "Black Tortoise must have made Vermilion Bird mad, again." Azure Dragon then stepped on the gas. White Tiger was driving behind him, and he also stepped on the gas and tried to catch up with the other. Swoosh, swoosh, Swoosh! The three cars ran fast on the road in the dark like three ghosts. Fortunately, no one saw them. If someone saw them, he might think, "Why are you driving so quickly? What's the rush?" But the four people in the cars were all martial artists at the Grandmaster peak. They had used their spiritual sense mind trick to feel what was happening around. Therefore, there was no chance that they would have car accidents. Should anything happen, they would be able to stop the cars at once by using their own power. The modified beetle was leading the way, and, squeak, the sound of tires rubbing against the ground resounded. Ordinary drivers would just crash into the beetle because of the momentum of the high speed, but as your dragon and white tiger pulled over immediately, the three cars had arrived at the edge of the North Sea. They got out of their cars after that. Then they looked at each other, only to see each other's faces changing. Soon, their eyes were fixed on the center of the North Sea. It was already dark and the vision was vague, but they could still tell that the dark clouds were rolling. Judging by the thunder, a storm was on its way. They all knew that there were two big shots fighting there. Isn't that where the warlord of Chan clan lives? As your dragon's mouth was trembling, is the warlord of Chan clan fighting with someone? The power is so overwhelming, the fight must be very intense. I don't think it's a sparring match. Could it be a feud between the masters of their clan? Captain Xuanhuan asked in confusion. In any case, the warlord of Chan clan must be fighting with someone. The fluctuation of power is so strong, we should inform our boss as soon as we can," said White Tiger hastily. Jiang Yanlan took out her phone and dialed Yi Danlang's number, then she said, "Oops, there's a strong fluctuation coming from the center of the North Sea. That's where the master of the Chen clan lives. Some people are having a fierce fight there." After that, Yi Danlang immediately hung up the phone. He was coming right away. "Let's go and have a look." As your dragon said hastily and made a move, he was skimming over the churning surface of the sea. The other three also hurried to catch up with him. The four of them quickly flew forward. Halfway there, whoosh, another figure flew across the sky at an unbelievable speed. "Damn, Danlang has already arrived?" Black Tortoise asked in surprise. He was startled and almost fell into the sea. "He was in the restaurant waiting for us to join him at dinner," Jiang Yanlan said as her gaze skimmed over Black Tortoise. Then two flaming lotuses emerged under her feet. She was flying even faster, darting towards Yi Danlang like a shooting star. As your dragon laughed out loud when he saw this. His body was then bathed in blue light, and his speed grew several times faster. Captain White Tiger's moves were simpler. He stepped on the sea surface and splashed many waves. By doing that, he was running forward quickly too. "They're all so fast," said Black Tortoise as his big body trembled. After he thought it for a second, he suddenly dived into the sea. It turned out his underwater speed was unbelievably fast. Quick as a flash, Yi Danlang became the first one to have arrived. When he saw the two men fighting fiercely in midair, he hesitated and murmured, "It's them." The overwhelming energy fluctuation just now made him think that it was a fight between the warlord of Chan clan and another powerhouse. It had never occurred to him that it was Emperor King and Zhang Han Yang. He wondered why their fight would be so intense. Yi Danlang raised his eyebrows and looked at the warlord of Chan clan. The man was standing on the other side of the island. He moved his body and came to Yi Danlang's side. "You're here." The warlord of Chan clan cast a glance at Yi Danlang. "I have to be here. The fluctuations are too strong to be ignored. I thought it was you, and I didn't expect it to be them," said Yi Danlang as he looked at the two that were still fighting. "They've been fighting for at least 10 minutes, said Gaik Singkong. He had heard of Yi Danlang before, but they had never met in person. The moment he saw Yi Danlang, he felt that Yi Danlang looked like a beggar, or a handsome beggar so to speak. Gaik Singkong also knew it clearly that this sloppy guy was one of the most powerful martial artists in this world. Yi Danlang was a little surprised when he heard what Gaik Singkong said, so he asked, "They've been fighting for more than 10 minutes. How come there's no winner? Is Emperor King deliberately doing this?" See for yourself." The warlord of Chan clan simply said these 4 words. At that moment, Jiang Yanlan and Azure Dragon had arrived. The 4 people were all stunned when they realized who the 2 fighters were. "What? Isn't that Zhang Han Yang and Emperor King? Why are they fighting again?" asked Jiang Yanlan in a daze. Plop. Black Tortoise rose to the surface. He was also startled when he saw what was happening. He exclaimed, "The strong fluctuation is from them. Gosh, how powerful are they? It seems that Emperor King has reached the Divine Realm medium stage, but Zhang Han Yang seems not to be in the Divine Realm yet. How come they are fighting neck and neck with each other?" Azure Dragon asked. He looked so confused. How could Zhang Han Yang be so powerful? No. White Tiger narrowed his eyes and said with certainty, "Emperor King is very powerful. A Grandmaster would never be able to fight neck and neck with one in the Divine Realm. I'm sure Emperor King is deliberately doing this. He isn't trying his best. But look at these powerful energy fluctuations. Does it look like that they aren't trying their best?" Jiang Yanlan retorted. She then looked in the direction of the fight and said, "Their strikes are definitely at the Divine Realm level, but it seems that they haven't used any secret methods to fight yet." As they discussed it, the fight grew more intense. The 2 men's swords and knives clashed and sparkled. They were giving out overwhelming pressure. Their dazzling moves made people feel that their eyes couldn't keep up with the speed. As they fought, they left a few after images behind, which looked as if there were 10 people fighting at the same time. The dense clashing sound and the intensity of the fight were almost frightening. The high-intensity fight lasted for 5 minutes. After Emperor King retreated nearly 100 meters, the fight finally slowed down. "Brother Han, I didn't expect your blade to be so powerful. Even with my strength at the God Realm medium stage, and with the unpredictable Shadow Sword in my hand, I still failed to take you down. Many people will be shocked if they heard about this," Shen Chenking exclaimed while they were fighting. "Chenking, you wield your sword too softly," Zhang Han said as he waved his sword and moved forward. "The sword is the king of all weapons. It should be noble and elegant. The movements should be flexible, graceful and agile. The sword skill should be neat and clear, like a flying dragon. Your swordsmanship should be unconventional and unpredictable. However, the saber is the boldest among all weapons. It is brave, mighty and powerful. You should be aggressive when you use a saber and you should be flexible when you use a sword. I want to follow my heart to make my moves. That was why I chose to use a sword. There are thousands of weapons in this world, and I've studied both sabers and swords. Your sword skills are too soft. It should be more aggressive." Shen Chenking raised his eyebrows when he heard that. He waved out a few more sword chi and asked, "My sword is the king of soft swords. It is a strange and unpredictable intent. The blade contained lots of changes which I can control with my mind. If it grows too aggressive, it will resemble your water-cutting skill too much." He was confused. The combination of yin and yang was the right path, but sometimes, it was difficult to maintain a balance when it came to a specific move. "You're wrong," Zhang Han shook his head and said, "To be frank, your swordsmanship is even lower than the beginner level because you've chosen the wrong way." "Beginner level?" Shen Chenking asked. He was speechless for quite a while and then he argued, "Your skill is sophisticated, and mine has its own merits." "You're wrong again," Zhang Han sighed and continued, "Those merits are of no help if you're in the wrong way. If you keep going this way, you will have more difficulties than other people. Now hand me the unpredictable shadow sword, I'll teach you a move." Zhang Han stopped as he said that. The purpose of the fight today was to guide Chen Chenking. After all, he was Chen Chenking's big brother. Chen Chenking's realm was slightly higher, but Zhang Han felt like teaching him anyway. Moreover, Zhang Han knew it clearly that he would break through the innateness soon, and that would make Chen Chenking his real little brother. All the people present were stunned after they heard Zhang Han's words. Without much hesitation, Chen Chenking threw the unpredictable shadow sword to Zhang Han. Zhang Han then threw the roaring flame blade to Chen Chenking. "Your sword is no more than ordinary," said Zhang Han after he checked the sword carefully. His eyes suddenly turned cold. His aura seemed to be a little vague at that moment, as if he was hiding in the void. The name of this move is Dark Shadow Demonic Lotus. Zhang Han's body trembled and divided into 2 duplicates, then the 2 duplicates turned into 4. Within a blink, 32 new duplicates had been created. They were surrounding Chen Chenkings and made different moves. They were wielding, thrusting, and stabbing. All kinds of moves were combined together. Suddenly, a profound aura spread out. With the help of the unpredictable shadow sword, Zhang Han performed a stunning move. A dark lotus flower suddenly descended from the sky above and bloomed upside down. It looked like a picture in a dream. It was like a lotus flower of death, beautiful yet murderous. Everyone could feel that this lotus was formed by dense sword chi. Chen Chenking raised his head in a daze. Cracking. The cracking sound resounded in his mind, because his understanding of swordsmanship had been crushed. Chapter 637, How do you know so much? Chen Chenking was God's favored one. He had the rare King Dragon blood, as well as many other trump cards. Today, he had used half of his trump cards to fight with Zhang Han, who was just a Grand Master, but he still lost. Chen Chenking was now doubting himself. However, that also made him respect Zhang Han even more. Zhang Han was, and would always be his big brother. When he looked at this vivid dark lotus, he almost couldn't believe that it was formed by exquisite sword chi. He wondered what kind of exquisite sword skills could be so perfect. Chen Chenking raised his head and watched the dark lotus flower falling. For a short moment, he was a little absent-minded. Even Chen Chenking was shocked, not to mention the others there. The warlord of Chan clan and Gaik Sinkong could no longer stand by and watch. They flew over 10 meters above the ground and observed the falling lotus. They didn't seem very happy. It's like a real lotus, and it is still rotating. This move is extremely complicated. What's Zhang Han's background? Is he really possessed by some ancient powerhouse? The warlord of Chan clan was murmuring to himself. He had no idea that what he had imagined was very similar to the truth. Zhang Han had cultivated for 500 years and had reached the 9th level of the tribulation realm. When he was about to gain immortality, divine thunder over the sky fell on him. That was called thunder tribulation. The dark clouds rolled above the ground and in the sky. Some of those who had been struck by the thunder would be reincarnated. Zhang Han found not only his mind, but also his physical strength had returned. He felt as if he had grown as strong as he was in the old days. However, God seemed to have missed something, which was the thunder yang tree that had taken Zhang Han 18 years to refine. It was being hidden in his ear. It was the reason why Zhang Han was making so much progress within such a short time, or he would never be able to grow so fast in cultivation. "This," said Yi Danlang, who suddenly rose more than 10 meters higher and looked grim. He said in a deep voice, "I'm really impressed by how much progress Zhang Han Yang has made. If he advanced into the divine realm someday, he would definitely become another immortal king." Immortal king? The warlord of Chan clan gasped as soon as he heard the 2 words. Because he was the only one there who knew what the 2 words really meant. Even Gaik Sinkong asked in confusion, "What does immortal king mean?" The warlord of Chan clan looked at the slowly rotating dark lotus and answered, "The immortal king is a very noble title. It means that the man is the most powerful martial artist among those in the divine realm. In the past 100 years, there was only one immortal king, which was Shan Wang in the Heavenly Knights sect. He defeated all his opponents and was granted with this title. The competition for the title is held once every 100 years. Only the one with the greatest talent can be the winner. Zhang Han is already so powerful, and it's possible he can be the immortal king if he advances into the divine realm. Then there will be 2 immortal kings in the Heavenly Knights sect. That's formidable." Alas! Yi Danlang suddenly sighed. It has taken us decades to reach that realm, while it has only taken Zhang Han Yang half a year to achieve that. I wondered how he could kill all his enemies no matter how powerful they were. Is it because he's making progress really fast, or just because he's literally a monster? Well, Zhang Han Yang himself should be the only one who knows the answer, the warlord of Chan clan said and gave a bitter smile. He's coming. Gai Xingkong's eyes narrowed, because this attack had already quietly fallen onto him. These people had been talking for almost 30 seconds. It had taken the Dark Lotus more than half a minute to fell down on the opponent's head, which might seem too slow for the two powerhouses. However, that was not because the Dark Lotus flower was slow, but because Zhang Han had slowed it down on purpose. When the lotus flower fell on his head, Chen Qingqing slowly closed his eyes. Boom! He violently flung the roaring flame saber forward, then he spread out his arms and shook his body. Ow! A deafening dragon roar came out his body. He then radiated rays of green light. The green light neutralized the power of the Dark Lotus flower. At that moment, Chen Qingqing unleashed the full power of his bloodline. Then he destroyed Zhang Han Yang's fierce sword Qi easily. His noble bloodline brought him many advantages, some of which could never be exceeded by swords moves. Zhang Han spared no effort to fight with him, but he would never be able to kill Chen Qingqing. Chen Qingqing had used more than half of his trump cards, but he was only at a tie with Zhang Han. He didn't use his ultimate skill because he was afraid that he could not control the power very well. However, he did not know that Zhang Han had a way to avoid danger even if he used his ultimate skill. Can you feel it? Asked Zhang Han when he saw Chen Qingqing neutralizing the attack. Yes, I can, Chen Qingqing said with his eyes closed. That's the power of domination. It doesn't belong to this world. You're wrong, Zhang Han said and seemed exasperated at Chen Qingqing's wrong answer. That's my power. Zhang Han's words stunned all the people around. They did not understand what Zhang Han was talking about. What Zhang Han said next made their hearts trembled. He said calmly, power is destined to be controlled by people. The power I used just now followed my heart. It exists only when I want it to. It died out when I want it to die out. You certainly know about sword skills, but they don't belong to you. It will be yours as long as you can force it to follow your heart. You should practice harder. It was only at this moment that Jiang Yanlan and the others finally knew that Zhang Han Yang was teaching Emperor King a lesson. They couldn't believe their eyes, because they knew Emperor King was a powerhouse in the divine realm. Judging by Emperor King's posture, he seemed to be listening to Zhang Han Yang very modestly. People wondered if this was really the Emperor King that they knew. I got it, I can feel it now. Chen Qingqing yelled. He opened his eyes and dazzling light were shooting out of it. He then looked at Zhang Han and said in a loud and clear voice, the true meaning of those skills need to be well versed, and before I use it, I still have a long way to go before I can really understand those skills. That's right. Zhang Han agreed and nodded with satisfaction. He waved his hand and took back the roaring flame saber. At the same time, he threw the unpredictable shadow sword over and said, I checked on you just now and found your king dragon blood, which was great, but you haven't brought out its best yet, so I'm sure you've made big mistakes using your skills. As soon as he said that, the facial expression froze on the face of the warlord of Chan clan. Gai Xingkong and Yi Danlang paused for a second. They were also surprised to see what was happening, and they wondered what was the next thing Zhang Han Yang was going to say. What do you mean? Asked Chen Qingqing. The light in his eyes was fading. He grabbed the unpredictable shadow sword and asked curiously, why don't I realize if I've made a mistake? That's a huge mistake. Zhang Han nodded and said, your cultivation method might be an incomplete one. It threatens your life and limits your power. Judging by all your moves, your cultivation stresses on those skills with the soul attribute, but you missed one critical thing. Or, I have to say, your way of cultivation is wrong. The warlord of Chan clan was stunned upon hearing those words, but Yi Danlang started cackling. Black Tortoise was also laughing. How could he tell? That made him look like a charlatan. Jiang Yanlan thought to herself with a smile on her face. She found this very intriguing. "Brother Han, how can you tell?" Shen Qingqing asked. "Because there are a lot of loopholes in your moves, which were quite obvious to me." Zhang Han waved his hand and answered, "I can help you fix all your mistakes in cultivating methods." The warlord of Chan clan opened his eyes widely after he heard those words. "Really? I knew that there was something wrong with my cultivation method. But wouldn't it be too hard to fix?" Shen Qingqing asked suspiciously. "It's not hard at all. I could tell your cultivation method was wrong as soon as I saw you. I've got better ways, but it comes at a price. I wonder if you," said Zhang Han as he looked at Shen Qingqing up and down. He was already considering how to get a better cultivation method for this young man. Just then, the pupils of the warlord of Chan clan shrank. He grew nervous and yelled, "Stop, that's enough." He didn't want them to continue because there were too many people watching, and they should be more cautious about that. Zhang Han glanced at the warlord of Chan clan and stopped talking. Zhang Han actually didn't care if other people heard the conversation because cultivation methods weren't that important. The method used for Shen Qingqing wouldn't apply to everyone. Moreover, Zhang Han was sure that nobody would be able to understand it even if he said it out aloud. But the warlord of Chan clan took it as if it was a treasure. He still felt Zhang Han was suspicious and he didn't want to discuss this in public. He then said, "You should go to the Mount Redleaf and wait for me. I'll be right away." "You sneaky old man," Yi Danlang said and smiled meaningfully. Other people thought they were going to discuss the cultivation method in private. To everyone's surprise, Zhang Han took out his phone. He took a peep at the time. Then he shook his head and said, "How about arranging it for some other time? It's late now and I think I should go back home and spend some time with my wife." As soon as he finished speaking, Zhang Han turned around and left, leaving those dumbfounded people behind. He left without delay. That was very quick. Humphrey, Vermilion Bird, look at him, what a family-oriented guy. He's going back home to spend time with his wife, said Black Tortoise. He was definitely implying something. He had a feeling that Jiang Yanlan's attitude towards Zhang Han was different. Maybe she had a crush on Zhang Han, so Black Tortoise teased her from time to time. "Why would I care? What's your problem?" Jiang Yanlan scolded and glared at him. Just then, somebody greeted him in the distance. "Hi, gorgeous, we meet again. Did you miss me?" "Shoo." Jiang Yanlan looked at Instructor Liu with flaming anger in her eyes. The cheeky man was waving to her. "Say that once again and I'll send you to the bottom of the lake," warned Jiang Yanlan, clenching her teeth. "I can't wait, it's so hot today and I want to cool down in there," Instructor Liu answered with a cheeky smile. Whoosh! Jiang Yanlan's body suddenly moved. She was so mad and looked as if she would kill Instructor Liu immediately. "Ouch, Mr. Gai, help!" Instructor Liu screamed and ran to Gai Xingkong for help. "Well, Mr. Danlang, you have very interesting subordinates," Gai Xingkong laughed. "Ahem," Yi Danlang coughed and waved his hand. "That's enough, Yanlan, don't be so hot-tempered. He's just joking, act like a lady, or you won't be able to get married in the future." Jiang Yanlan suddenly blushed out of anger. She looked at Yi Danlang and was about to say something, but just by then, she saw Yi Danlang already move and fly away. "Humphrey!" Jiang Yanlan snorted and glared at Instructor Liu. "I'll definitely beat the hell out of you someday." After that, she moved her body and left quickly. "Ha, ha!" Tortoise laughed and gave Instructor Liu a thumbs up. He didn't say it out loud, but he seemed to approve of what Instructor Liu had done. He found it interesting to see Jiang Yanlan get annoyed. The three of them left in a hurry after that. Other people also left the North Sea after they said goodbye to each other. On their way back, they were still discussing it. The fight today was so formidable. None of them knew that there were mistakes in Emperor King's cultivation method. Zhang Han promised to give Emperor King a better cultivation method. People were wondering if he would do it, and if he would, how much would Emperor King power increase? There was no doubt that he would grow even stronger than he was now. People were wondering why Zhang Han Yang knew almost everything. Chapter 638, The Zhang Clan's Visit. In a farmyard on a small island in the center of the North Sea, under the willow, the warlord of Chan Clan and Chen Qingqing sat at the tea table. They were enjoying some tea. The warlord of Chan Clan had no expression on his face, but Chen Qingqing could feel that his grandfather wasn't in a good mood. Actually, the old man was in a very bad mood at this moment. In order to nurture the most talented young man, the clan had put much effort and paid a great price. That was part of the reason why Emperor King could become a legend. The warlord of Chan Clan was the supporter behind Emperor King's back. He had risked his life to get the cultivation method back for Emperor King. He couldn't believe that Zhang Han Yang just called it a mistake. How could he work out the problem just by observing your moves and aura? How did he know the flaws in your cultivation method? The warlord of Chan Clan looked at Chen Qingqing with a grim look. He wondered if it was Chen Qingqing that had told Zhang Han the secret. If that was true, that meant he had put an effort to nurture an idiot. Seeing the expression of the warlord of Chan Clan, Chen Qingqing's face froze. He said innocently, "Brother Han and I haven't discussed anything about martial arts. Why would we talk about the cultivation method?" Then how did he know? The war god of the Chen clan frowned. "I don't think he was lying, he must have worked it out by himself," said Chen Qingqing as he looked at the moon in the sky. "After all, his spiritual sense-mind trick is more powerful than we can imagine." This. The warlord of Chan Clan suddenly fell silent. The capacity of Zhang Han's spiritual sense-mind trick seemed to have reached the Earth realm. He didn't know how the Earth realm was like, either, so he wouldn't insist that Zhang Han wasn't able to work it out. 1 minute passed by. The warlord of Chan Clan suddenly sighed. "Although the spiritual sense-mind trick isn't very aggressive, I have to admit that quantitative change may lead to qualitative change. I had the hunch that there would soon be 2 immortal kings in Heavenly Knight's sect." Chen Qingqing was silent for a long time after he heard that. He knew his grandpa expected more from him. He cupped his hands and said, "I'm sorry, Grandpa, I've let you down." "No, you haven't," the warlord of Chan Clan said and shook his head. "I just want to know whether his comments on your cultivation are correct or not." "We'll know tomorrow," Chen Qingqing replied after he took a sip of tea. "Your cultivation method has been integrated with your meridians. Even if there are some flaws, and even if it is a mistake, you'll have no way to go back," said the warlord of Chan Clan. He took out a bottle of wine and poured a glass for himself to drink. Chen Qingqing saw this and said, "Grandpa, I have to go now." Then he turned around and left. The warlord of Chan Clan is a regular old man, and Chen Qingqing knew that the old man had already believed Zhang Han's words. Zhang Han might have better cultivation methods, but Chen Qingqing wouldn't be able to practice it. The old man wondered if the mistake he made had destroyed Chen Qingqing's future. Chen Qingqing smiled as he left the farmyard. "Grandpa, I'll be doing fine no matter what happens. You don't have to worry too much. Maybe Brother Han can help me find the solution," he said as he quickly rose into the air, flying towards the manor of their clan. In fact, the fight started as Zhang Han entered the court and ended very soon. It had taken less than half an hour. Therefore, Zhang Han had already landed in the villain area of the Jins before 12 o'clock. When he returned to his room, he saw Xian playing with her mobile phone on the bed. "Ahem," Zhang Han coughed softly to remind her, but in surprise. "Ah!" Xian was startled. She quickly hid her phone under the quilt and looked at Zhang Han without blinking. 2 seconds later, she whispered, "You are back, just lie down and sleep." Xian's weird reaction made Zhang Han curious. He activated his soul sense and found her little secret. It turned out that she felt bored and logged on her Weibo. She sent her second piece of Weibo in history, which was Humphrey, "I love my wife very much. I'll do whatever she tells me to do in the future." That sentence just took Xian more than 10 minutes to come up with. She had to consider a lot before she sent it to make sure the sentence sounds cute. To Xian's surprise, within the 10 minutes after she sent the piece of Weibo, there were already 100,000 comments and more than 500,000 likes. That was unbelievable. The comments below were very intriguing. What the HLL? Master Han Yang is married? I knew it. Master Han Yang and Xian, the two once sang a love song together in a program. They looked so intimate. But I haven't heard of any news about Xian's marriage. It's probably fake, isn't it? It's fake? Question mark. Xian snorted softly when she saw this comment with 10,000 likes. She then opened his Weibo and sent a new piece again, which was, "Ha, I love my husband so much, I'll do whatever he tells me in the future." Bang! The two posts on Weibo went viral on the internet. For a time, there were a lot of people paying attention to this topic. Before 12 o'clock, the news headlined all important websites. Everyone was discussing if Master Han Yang and Xian were really a couple. This piece of Weibo instantly dominated all the most searched hashtags. Xian was checking on Zhang Han's Weibo when he returned. That was why she looked embarrassed when Zhang Han was back. She lay on the bed and didn't know what to do, so she paused for a second and looked at Zhang Han with her big eyes. "I'm coming," Zhang Han said with a smile. He took off his jacket and got on the bed quickly. Then he held the beauty in his arms and his hands became a little restless. They were constantly wandering on the fascinating body. His hands were like wiggling dragons. The quilt was heated up and the temperature was getting higher and higher. A hot atmosphere made everything blurred to Xian. Her eyes were filled with love. "Let's go to the guest bedroom." Zhang Han stood up and carried Xian out of the master bedroom. Soon, a rhythmic sound came out of the guest bedroom. Before that, Zhang Han covered the entire villa with his powerful spiritual sense. He built an invisible barrier to forbid outsiders from detecting the house. He couldn't be careful enough given how high his social position was now. Some rude guys could spy on the house and this would be an embarrassing live show for him if Zhang Han hadn't done that. Only Zhang Han could know how wonderful the night was. In fact, Xian had changed a lot since she met Zhang Han. She was a regular beautiful woman, a beauty after makeup. She also looked great without makeup. But she hadn't been very sophisticated. Now she looked very charming even without washing her face or doing her makeup. She looked like a fairy descending to the world. There was an old saying, if you married the right person, you would become more and more beautiful and younger. If you married the wrong person, you would be aging faster than others. The next day, Patriarch Chen got up early and went to the dining hall with his wife to arrange a nice breakfast. They tried very hard to entertain Zhang Han. At about 7 o'clock, Meng sat up next to Zhang Han. She rubbed her eyes and woke up. As soon as the little princess woke up, Zhang Han and Xian got up, too. However, when Xian sat up, the quilt slipped off her, revealing her charming body. Xian bit her lips and grabbed the quilt to cover herself. Zhang Han grinned as soon as he saw it. It was a very tiring night, so she forgot to put on her pajamas when they went back to the master bedroom. That saved her the trouble of taking off her pajamas. She started to dress up right away, and then she took Meng's little hand and went to the bathroom to do her makeup. Meng muttered as they walked to the bathroom, "Mommy, I want 2 braids." The girl liked to look good. Zhang Han shook his head and smiled. He had finished tidying up, so he walked to the balcony and stretched his arms, enjoying the beautiful scenery of the manor. The layout of this place was ingenious, but it was still no match for the scenery of the Mount New Moon. It took Meng and Xian more than half an hour to get dressed. Zhang Han felt that they were already faster than most women. Xian was wearing a thick hoodie, a leather skirt, and shorter leather boots. Meng was wearing almost the same thing. She was wearing a hoodie, a pair of jeans, and a pair of white shoes. Zhang Han was in black casual clothes. After the 3 people went out of the door, people on their way to the dining hall all greeted them. There were about a dozen people, and all of them exclaimed, "Mr. Zhang and his family are all good looking." Ha, there are many people on the internet saying that Xian had plastic surgery, but look at her daughter. She's so beautiful, and it's only because she has good genes. They have good looks, great fortune, and powerful strength. Their social status is also very high. Zhang Han could hear the discussion of the crowd, but Xian and Meng Meng couldn't hear it. Meng Meng was warm-hearted. When she saw their eyes, she waved her small hands and greeted them with a smile. "Hello, guys." She was no longer the shy girl. When they arrived at the restaurant, he saw Wang Zanping, Rong Jiaxin, and Wang Ming eating at a table. Patriarch Chen, his wife, and another man in his 20s were sitting with them. "Mr. Zhang." Patriarch Chen greeted them. His wife and the young man stood up hastily. "Just sit down, Patriarch Chen," said Zhang Han. He waved his hand and smiled. "It's fine, we need to pay our respect to you. Please allow me to introduce my son to you. His name is Chen Chenlu." "What?" Zhang Han hesitated for a while upon hearing that name. That name was so funny. Whoever gave him that name was very inconsiderate. Chenlu meant always green most of the time, but it also sounded like always be cheated in their language. Even Xian couldn't help laughing, but she tried hard to bite her lips so that she wouldn't burst into laughter. Meng Meng did not know what was happening. She looked up and greeted them. Hello, everyone." Seeing the expressions of Zhang Han and Xian, Patriarch Chen's wife laughed and explained, "That's his nickname, we want him to inherit his brother's luck. His real name is Chenb. In fact, this name was just a joke between Chenb and his friends when they were young. His parents once heard about it and they used it here today because they wanted to amuse Zhang Han with that name. Obviously, they had achieved their goal. Brother Zhang Han, sister Xian, Meng Meng, how are you?" Chenb greeted them respectfully. "Nice to meet you." After they greeted each other, Zhang Han and his family went to the other side and sat down on a bar counter with all kinds of breakfast on it. They chose some and sat down to enjoy those dishes slowly. 2 minutes later, Chen Chenking, Zhao Feng, Ahu, and others also came over. Fortunately, the table was big enough for all these people to sit together and eat. Halfway through the meal, a man in a suit rushed into the hall. He was the gardener of the manor. He walked to Patriarch Chen and whispered to him. "Okay," Patriarch Chen said and nodded. Then he looked at Zhang Han, and said with a smile, "Well, Patriarch Zhang Nan brought some of his disciples and they are now at the gate of our clan. They wanted to see you. Do you want to see them?" Zhang Han's chopsticks shook when he heard that. Then he put down his chopsticks and said, "Let them in." Xian also took a look at Zhang Han. She knew that the Zhang clan was always a pent-up issue in Zhang Han's heart. Xian also knew that Zhang Han was no longer a member of the Zhang clan. She wondered how he would deal with those people this time. She somehow felt that Zhang Han wouldn't punish them anymore. Xian's guess was true. When Zhang Han learned that he was not one of the Zhangs, all his feelings for the clan ended up with a relieved sigh. God was making a fool of him. Maybe his father was taking refuge in the Zhang clan, but the patriarchs still gave away his position to him. Maybe they wanted to flaunt his father's martial arts identity to promote the social status of the clan, or maybe they did it because of the warlord of Chan clan. There might be lots of reasons, but above all, the clan had once harbored his father. Zhang Han even thought that the Zhang clan didn't do anything wrong because the whole story was too complicated. He didn't want to be bothered by that anymore. However, these people from the Zhang clan at the gate had no clue of this. The 8 of them went in and the leading one was Zhang Nan. He looked a little gaunt. When they walked to the restaurant, they all looked very respectful. Zhang Han was now a person way beyond their reach. He was so highly respected now. They knew they had missed a good opportunity, but it was already too late. There was no point regretting now. As soon as they entered the restaurant, they saw the group of people sitting on the right side. It was Emperor King, Zhang Han, Chen Tanjiao, Wang Zanping, and the others. Patriarch Chen must be very glad to see this. Zhang Nan thought to himself. He was disappointed and couldn't help sighing. He couldn't laugh, so he walked over with a complex expression. Mr. Zhang, what happened last time was our fault. Please take this compensation," said Zhang Nan as he cupped his hands. Then he bowed slowly.
Patriarch Chen shook his head when he saw this. He didn't do anything, only intending to watch. Zhang Han also turned around and sat down facing them, but he did not stand up. After that, Zhang Nan took out a golden bank card from his pocket and handed it to Zhang Han with both hands. Zhang Han took it over casually. He checked the card and knew that there was at least 10 billion in the account. Just then, a middle-aged man at the back gritted his teeth and mumbled, "We didn't want to do this. Either, we've been under lots of pressure lately, or we would have. Second brother, watch your words." Zhang Nan yelled, his facial expression changed, and he glared at the man behind him. "I told you not to be mouthy before we arrived." To their surprise, Zhang Han replied, "The disciples of the Wind Snow School are indeed a pressure that you can never deal with." Zhang Nan turned around and looked at Zhang Han, because he felt that something had been changed. Under everyone's gaze, Zhang Han threw the bank card back into Zhang Nan's hand casually and said, "Take it back." After that, Zhang Han looked at Patriarch Chen and said, "Please take care of the Zhang clan for my sake." Hiss. Many people gasped when they heard that. Even Patriarch Chen was stunned, but he reacted very quickly and replied, "Okay, anything for you." Then Zhang Han looked at the stunned Zhang Nan and the others, shaking his head and saying, "The accounts between us are cleared now. My parents and I are not members of the Zhang clan, but I'll keep you safe and prosperous for 100 years for old time's sake. If you have any trouble in the future, you can turn to Patriarch Chen, the warlord of Chan clan, or Chen Chenking, they'll help you." That announcement was like thunder that shocked Zhang Nan and the others. Zhang Nan felt a little dizzy. He looked at Zhang Han with confusion. However, Zhang Han turned away from them and said slowly, "You can go home and ask your master." Patriarch Chen knew Zhang Han didn't want to say any more. He stood up quickly and smiled to those guests from the Zhang clan. Then he said, "Mr. Zhang, I can see our two clans cooperating in the future. Why don't you go back and study it first so that we can make an appointment to discuss it someday? That would be great." Zhang Nan replied excitedly, "Then please forgive us, we'll leave here right away." In the end, Zhang Nan looked at Zhang Han's back and said, "Thank you." After that, he left the dining hall with his people who had all kinds of expressions on their faces. They felt lucky as if they had survived a catastrophe. Zhang Han's promise to keep them prosperous for 100 years was so unexpected and important. At the same time, they knew their accounts with Zhang Han's family is cleared, because when Zhang Han just mentioned the Zhang clan could ask Patriarch Chen, Chen Chenking, and the warlord of Chan clan for help, he didn't say his own name. That was a very clear implication. Zhang Nan felt it such a pity, but he was already satisfied with Zhang Han's promise. Many clans in Shangjing couldn't wait to see the Zhang clan ending up as a joke. The family had a real genius, but they were so blind to have missed the opportunity. Now they had to pay a 10 billion compensation, which was really eye-opening. Many clans were glad to see such a drama happening in real life, but to everyone's surprise, it was not a blessing at all that the Zhang clan had lost. Go back and ask your master about what this was. At the gate of the Chin's clan, Zhang Nan turned around and looked in the direction of the dining room. Then he sighed and got into the car. They slowly drove away. The mood in the dining room had been affected, just for a few seconds. Later on, no one talked about what had just happened anymore. Chen Chenking watched Meng Meng finish eating and asked Zhang Han, "Brother Han, you said I've made mistakes in my cultivation method. Shall we discuss it sometime? Where did you learn it?" asked Zhang Han. "My grandfather found it on a stone tablet from Red Leaf Mountain." Chapter 639. The warlord of Chan clan is amazed. "It's engraved on the stone tablet?" Zhang Han asked after a pause. "Yes." Chen Chenking nodded. "My grandfather had researched the cultivation method on the stone tablets for 10 years. The method is divided into 4 volumes, however, in the connection part between the 3rd and 4th volumes, there is a sword cut. Therefore, the cultivation method I am cultivating is the one improved by my grandfather. That's why I am in a life and death situation before I can reach the divine realm."
Hearing Chen Qingqing talking about the cultivation method, Xian thought for a while and decided not to join the conversation. She then put Meng Meng on the ground, held her hands, and played with her at the other end of the table. The others present, on the other hand, looked at Zhang Han with widened eyes, looking forward to his further reply. Zhang Han patted Chen Qingqing on the shoulder and said with amusement, "You're already good enough, with your grandfather's half-assed skill. It's lucky for him that he's able to repair a cultivation method that doesn't lead to anyone's death." Huh? All the people, including Patriarch Chen and his wife, even Wang Zanping, and Wang Ming, were dumbfounded and their minds were racing fast. What did you say? The warlord of Chan clan has half-assed skill. In fact, Zhang Han had already picked his wording carefully. What he had wanted to say was actually more vulgar, but after thinking about it, he thought that since he was still a guest in the Chen's house, he should at least show some respect. But others didn't feel his respect at all. Chen Qingqing felt particularly awkward. The corners of his mouth twitched, his mouth uttered as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he said nothing. He couldn't find the right words to express his feelings. "Did you say that I am half-assed?" Suddenly, an irritated voice sounded from the side of the dining hall. Hiss. "Oh, no, get caught on the spot." Cold sweat dripped down from Patriarch Chen's forehead. Simultaneously, all eyes looked over, only to see the warlord and Gai Xingkong standing at the entrance of the dining hall. It could be seen that the warlord's face was a little dark, while Gai Xingkong seemed to be holding back his urge to burst out laughing. After the long talk of last night, Gai Xingkong and the warlord became familiar with each other. The warlord welcomed friends like Gai Xingkong, although the latter was not a member of the National Security Agency. He was also guarding the safety of Shangjing. Sometimes, there was nothing wrong to build a connection with the people with top-level strength like Gai Xingkong in the secular world. And also, they had a connection with Zhang Wenyu. The warlord had received the grace of Zhang Wenyu's father, and Zhang Wenyu was also Gai Xingkong's close friend. With the two aspects, it was natural for them to have a close relationship. This morning, the two also arrived at Chen's manor, planning to have breakfast there and see how Zhang Han gave Emperor King a high-grade cultivation method. But they didn't expect that as soon as they walked in, they heard Zhang Han's words. "Did my temper become too mild recently? Why did this guy show no respect to me at all? Does he know the virtue of respecting the old? Do I have to use my overwhelming strength to teach him a lesson?" At that time, the warlord was thinking about beating Zhang Han. As for the others, they couldn't help but change their face slightly. They felt as if they were speaking ill of the warlord behind his back, and being caught by him on the spot. Yet, when Zhang Han turned around, his expression was very calm and his tone was just tinged with a little bit of surprise. "Elder Chen, Uncle Gai, you're here." "Humphrey, if I was not here, how could I hear you speak ill of me behind my back?" The warlord snapped and strode toward the crowd. "Speaking ill of you behind your back?" Zhang Han shook his head slightly. "Elder Chen, you misunderstood me." Hiss. Many people in the dining hall gasped in surprise. Blue veins stood out on the warlord's temples and he burst out, "What misunderstanding are you referring to?" "I'm telling the truth," Zhang Han answered simply. Upon hearing that, Gai Xingkong slightly staggered, and then locked his eyes on the warlord to prevent him from suddenly attacking Zhang Han. But the warlord's furious expression was softened by a silvery voice. "Grandpa, Grandpa Gai, good morning." Meng Meng greeted as she waved her small hand aside. Hearing Meng Meng's voice, the warlord looked slightly stiff, turned around, and looked at her with a squeezed smile. "Good morning, Meng Meng." Of course, the warlord wouldn't let Zhang Han off that easily. He still felt pissed off. Immediately sitting next to Zhang Han, he snorted, "Brat, explain more clearly. If your explanations are not convincing, I will teach you a lesson. Elder Chen, your understanding of cultivation method is too shallow. A set of cultivation method can have a lot of changes. It can be said that the slightest error in it will lead to a big mistake. Qingqing can reach this realm by that cultivation method, which only means that he is very lucky. Zhang Han cast a glance at the warlord. Somehow, the warlord felt strange, as if he were the junior one who was hearing the preach of a senior. What is happening? Everyone, including Gai Xingkong and Chen Qingqing, looked at Zhang Han with surprise and uncertainty. Unexpectedly, whomever Zhang Han was facing, his attitude was so airy, especially right here and right now. They felt his temperament was so unique and mysterious that they found it hard to describe. For a moment, they felt that Zhang Han was right, but subconsciously, they refuted this feeling. It was the warlord that Zhang Han was commenting. The warlord was a master at the God Realm peak stage, very close to the Earth Realm, but what about Zhang Han? He was just a Wu Dao Grand Master. Although the latter was a genius, the gap between their levels was just too wide to cross. Among the crowd on the spot, only Xian knew how awesome his husband was. Of course, outsiders couldn't know Zhang Han's real strength. Did you tell him? The warlord looked at Chen Qingqing. Not yet, I just explained the situation roughly. Chen Qingqing shook his head. Then how could you be so sure that the cultivation method is not right? The warlord narrowed his eyes and looked at Zhang Han. I will know when I see the tablet. Zhang Han didn't want to explain any more. After that, he stopped looking at their warlord. Choked by his words, the warlord of Chan clan was now speechless. After a while, he mumbled, "Let's check on it later." Seeing the situation, the others had different feelings in their mind. They had a lot of exclamations in their mind. Within half a year, Zhang Han had made such rapid progress. Now, he even reached the level to have a dialogue on an equal footing with the warlord. It was just too shocking. It was known that in today's martial arts world, only a handful of people like Yi Tanlang could have such a privilege. Even Gai Xingkong after the breakthrough, and Wang were weaker than the strong warriors like Warlord and Yi Tanlang, whose strength was very close to Earth Realm. The Earth Realm warriors were all supposed to be the backbone force of the worldlet. After the small episode, those eager to find out the truth sped up their dinner. After a short while, Patriarch Chen took the lead and said, "I'm done." Wang Zanping, Zhao Feng, and others followed suit. "I am stuffed. Done. Let's go there now, shall we?" Chen Qingqing suggested. The warlord and Gai Xingkong looked at each other in disbelief. "But we sat down just now, and we haven't had a bite yet. What are you doing?" The two remained silent for a second. Then, Gai Xingkong stood up and said, "All right, let's do the business first." "Well." The warlord sighed, and also stood up. "I'll wait for you at the Mount Red Leaf." After that, he left alone. Gai Xingkong had a helpless smile and chased after the warlord. Patriarch Chen was thinking about how to arrange the transportation properly. Zhang Han turned to the back of the table, looked at Meng Meng, and said, "Meng Meng, would you like to go mountain climbing with me?" "Well, mountain climbing, would it be tiring?" Meng Meng asked innocently. She was searching for her memory about mount climbing. "I seemed to have climbed some mountain, but I couldn't think of which mountain. Did I ever climb a mountain or not? Oops, I just can't remember." Seeing Meng Meng's adorable expression, Zhang Han laughed happily, stroked Meng Meng's little head, and said with a smile, "If you are tired, I will hold you." Yes. Meng Meng slipped off the chair by herself, jumped a few times, and exclaimed, "Yeah, go mountain climbing now." Xian had a light smile and stood up. At that time, Patriarch Chen hurried forward and said, "The cars are ready." "Well, let's go there now," Zhang Han said. As a result, those who didn't finish the meal put down their chopsticks, wiped the corners of their mouths with paper towels casually, and also went out. They walked to the place where a group of luxury cars parked. After leaving the Chen's manor, the motorcade attracted a lot of attention. Now that the Lunar New Year holiday was over, The Shangjing city became crowded again and there were a lot of pedestrians on the roadsides. When they saw the motorcade, many people stopped to watch and had a heated discussion. A total of 18 luxury cars. Is there any event held by the Chen clan? Such a luxury lineup. I guess they are going to visit a very important figure. Not necessarily. The Juns have a high status in Shangjing. No matter what, people should pay a visit to the Juns, but not the other way around. Your guesses are wrong. At that time, someone who knew the truth said slowly, the Juns are not going to visit anyone. A big shot is now in the Chen's manor. They must be receiving him. Yes, Zhang Han must be in one of the cars. Emperor King's elder brother Merciless Zhang is in their manor. They will try all their best to treat him. The handful of warriors among the pedestrians who thought of the stories of Emperor King and Merciless Zhang found their hearts were pounding fast. Obviously, the stories were terrible memories for them. Now the entire martial arts world knows that the era of Merciless Zhang has come. No matter where he is, he will be in the limelight. The several warriors present at the scene watched the disappearance of the motorcade and remained silent for a long time. As soon as the Chin's motorcade got out, all the major clans knew about it quickly. One of the features of rich and well-known clans was that they would always flourish and have many offspring. The leaders of the families didn't have to pay attention to such news on purpose. The young generation in their families would find it out first and report it to them. So many people from those clans knew that the Juns sent out a large team that headed for the Mount Red Leaf. After about an hour and a half's trip, the motorcade detoured and finally reached the vicinity of Mount Red Leaf. All the people then climbed along the steps of the mountain from the south. The steps there were slightly steep, and red maple trees could be seen on both sides. It was still early spring. The trees were supposed to be in hibernation, but the red leaf trees on the mountain were flourishing. Although they were not as flourishing as they were in autumn, they also had their unique charm. Climbing up along the mountain road in the forest made people feel comfortable. Considering Xian and Meng, everyone's climbing speed was very slow, just like ordinary people. After walking for dozens of meters, Meng pouted and mumbled, "Papa, I'm tired." "Then I will hold you." Zhang Han smiled and held Meng in his arms. After thinking for a few seconds, he put Meng on his neck. Meng's small hands were held by Zhang Han's big hands. She sat there stably and felt secure. Excited, she couldn't help screaming, "Wow, I am getting taller." Xian next to the father and daughter smiled, and her big beautiful eyes blinked, as if she was wondering if she should try this way sometime. Meng, look at that tree, is it beautiful? Papa, look, there's a little squirrel. The entire mountain seemed to be full of the cheerful voices of the father and daughter. After they had finished more than half of the way, Meng's big shining eyes suddenly winked and she said, "Papa, are you tired?" "I am not tired, Meng, you are very light, so I won't get tired. Even if you grow up, I will not be tired," Zhang Han answered with a smile. No, Papa, when I grow up, I will hold you to climb the mountain." Hoo-ha. Zhang Han was moved by her daughter's sudden words. He felt like being stroked by the spring breeze, so warm and cozy. His lips moved slightly, trying to say something, but he didn't. Silence was better than speech now. Others had varied expressions on their faces. In particular, Wang Ming and Rong Jiaxin were blaming themselves in the depths of their hearts. Their daughter, Wang Ya, should have been able to live like a princess. Yet, due to their negligence, they failed to protect their daughter. Is the pursuit of martial arts really that important? Wang Ming's heart lurched violently. Looking at the backs of Zhang Han and Meng, he suddenly felt a little sad. No, it's not important. It was all my fault. If my concern for my daughter were equal to half or even 1/10 of Zhang Han's concern for his daughter, she would not have suffered like that. Wang Ming let out a soft sigh. Rong Jiaxin knew what her husband was thinking, so she held his hand tightly. Wang Ming smiled slightly. Trying not to be sentimental, he thought to himself, Let bygones be bygones. I should cherish what I have now and look forward to the promising tomorrow. Luckily, it's not too late to amend my mistakes. I will give you a better life." In Wang Ming's heart, he was very grateful to Zhang Han. Thanks to Zhang Han, he not only had an improvement in his strength, but also had a better understanding of life. Now he cherished his family more than anything else. Zhang Han didn't know that he had such an impact on Wang Ming. He just showed his true self in front of others. He did not need to hide anything, nor did he need to care about anything insignificant. Because he was confident in himself. When the group was very close to the top of the mountain, they climbed a dozen more minutes or so, and finally reached the top. As they walked inside, they also saw the small manor there. When they arrived at the manor, Xian took Meng Meng, Rong Jiaxin, and the others to play outside, while Zhang Han followed Chen Qingqing to the stone house in the innermost side. Master Wang, who was in charge of the manor, stood nearby and looked at the scene with a smile. Mount Redleaf hasn't been this lively for a long time. Although the people of Kiao clan and Lin clan came a few days ago, their main purpose was to seek refuge, not for sightseeing, and the atmosphere then was completely different. Han, can we watch? Wang Zanping couldn't help but curiously asked when he saw Zhang Han and Emperor King walking toward the stone house. He just couldn't wait to see what would happen. Yes. Zhang Han nodded. For something like a cultivation method, even if it was given to someone, it might not be suitable for him. Hence, there was no need to hide it. Moreover, most people would not be able to understand it. Cultivation methods were not very precious in the cultivation world. Even the top cultivation methods could be bought by treasures, but secret supernatural power was worth a lot. Because of the secret supernatural power, the cultivation methods had increased their value, because they were all mutually connected. The things contained in them were relatively complicated. It also took Zhang Han many years to gradually understand them. Han, please. Chen Qingqing gestured and took the lead to enter the stone house. Zhang Han had thought there would be a few rooms, but he didn't expect that Chen Qingqing waved his arm and a cave appeared on the inner side of the stone room. On both sides of the cave entrance, there were some shining beads. They were not night-luminescent pearls, but mana beads. So Zhang Han, Chen Qingqing, Wang Zanping, and Wang Zanzong walked inside the cave. The way forward felt like a 30-degree downward slope. The Redleaf Mountain was not big, but it took them 5 minutes to reach the end. At the end, they saw a circular field like a square. In the middle, there was a pillar, which was 3 meters high and a man could sit on its top. In front of the opposite wall, there was a 5-meter high and 10-meter wide stone, which seemed to be inscribed with something. At that moment, the warlord of Chan clan and Gaik Sinkong were talking in front of the boulder. The four walked on the platform. Wang Zanping was startled. Quite abundant spiritual qi. A day's cultivation here is equal to a month's outside world, Wang Zanzong said with some emotion. This was the special function of the blessed region. It could be used for cultivation. As for the outside world, he meant the deep mountain forests with thin spiritual qi, not any city. Speaking of the city, half a year's cultivation in a city was only comparable to a day's here. As the two were busy in observing the spiritual qi around, Zhang Han walked straight to the front boulder. Chen Qingqing followed behind him. It was not until they approached that they heard that Gaik Sinkong was exclaiming while looking at the boulder. This is the most complicated cultivation method I've ever seen. Elder Chen, since you could fix it, you are really awesome. I am not exaggerating at all. Gaik Sinkong flattered the warlord, but the warlord sneered. Obviously, some people don't think so, and they say that I'm half-assed. If it was not for the sake of King Zhang, I would have beaten him up. It was obvious that he was still mad at Zhang Han. Hearing his grandfather's words, Chen Qingqing had a wry smile. It never came to his mind that his grandfather, who had always been calm and steady, would also have lost his temper. What surprised the crowd more was Zhang Han. He walked to the crowd, took a few glances at the boulder, and said with a nod, This cultivation method is too common, and it was even altered to a worse state. Otherwise, Qin King could have broken through to the divine realm 3 years earlier. What did you say? The warlord frowned. Repeated mockery like that irritated him more. Meanwhile, when he saw what Zhang Han was doing, his face changed drastically, his eyes full of shock and doubts. It's very simple to fix this cultivation method. A long sword suddenly appeared in Zhang Han's hand. It was the demon dancing sword. He waved it forward, leaving traces on the boulder, and said, "This set of cultivation method has more water attribute. Its problem is not just the incomplete third volume. The connection part of the first and second volumes is also wrong, and the method of the first volume is also incorrect. The most important thing is that Qin King has King Dragon blood. When he cultivates a secondary cultivation method with a water attribute, it will be extremely easy for him to form the cultivation method of Flood Dragon in his meridians. This makes him weaker. Although King Dragon blood is not the upper level, it is still superior to the Flood Dragon." Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. With Zhang Han's words, his sword danced quickly in his hand and left a lot of marks on the boulder. The pattern on it was being changed again and again, which was very different from the previous one. It only took 5 seconds for Zhang Han to finish the change. He then put away his sword and said, "Now, look at the improved version." Hiss. Everyone present gasped deeply. At the same time, Xinkong was a little shocked and bewildered. "Please, this is a cultivation method, the one that Emperor King is cultivating. Han, you fixed it in a few seconds? Are you sure you were not drawing?" Unlike others' bewilderment, the warlord's pupils contracted, his palms trembling, and he dashed to the front of the boulder. Stroking the new trace with his hand, he said in shock, "Miracle, this is a miracle." Chapter 640, Methods Teaching. The warlord of Chan clan had studied the methods carved on the boulder for 10 years. No one knew this set of methods better than him. He didn't understand what Zhang Han carved, but what he could understand was that the sword mark added by Zhang Han seemed to activate the whole picture. The picture was now as vivid as life. It was so charming. After some changes, all the patterns from the first volume to the 4th volume were combined into a fascinating array. The warlord of Chan clan trembled with excitement and couldn't help exclaiming, "A work of art! This is a work of art!" The warlord of Chan clan walked back and forth in front of the boulder, forgetting everything else. Who am I? Where am I? In the eyes of the warlord of Chan clan, there was only this giant stone, and only this set of methods like a dragon's movements. This. Shen King, standing behind him, was stunned. He didn't expect that this set of incomplete methods, after being randomly changed by Brother Han, would become so smooth and wonderful. He firmly believed that if he practiced according to this set of methods, he would never have to worry about the same risk as before. "I'll die if I can't advance to the divine realm stage." Bullshit. Shen King silently cursed and vented the pressure he had been under all these years. It was rare for him. The glory of Emperor King was well known all over the world, but only he himself knew how much pressure he bore, since he would die if he failed to make progress. For those who were not strong-willed, they would already go crazy in this case. In contrast, Shen King could maintain this kind of state all the time, which was very good. Xinkong stared at the methods for 10 seconds, and then said in a deep voice, "If the previous methods looked ordinary, the current methods are as perfect as the full moon, giving us a mysterious feeling. What do you know?" The warlord of Chan clan immediately retorted, "Compared with the current set of methods, the former one was rubbish." All the onlookers fell into silence. They all felt embarrassed. "Elder, it was you who wrote the previous garbage methods." It took another 30 seconds for the warlord of Chan clan to notice the suddenly changing atmosphere. He paused, still excited, but tried to calm himself down. It was rare for this experienced aged man to get excited like this. Ahem. The warlord of Chan clan cleared his throat and then turned his gaze to Zhang Han. The aged man performed an act of respect and then said, "It's just magic, Zhang Han, you really surprised me. How did you do it?" "Elder Chen, this is actually very simple, of course, for me." Zhang Han smiled at the warlord of Chan clan. "Dare you show off? Dare you take the methods you have developed as a treasure?" It seemed as if the warlord of Chan clan had heard Zhang Han's unspoken criticism, who said embarrassedly, Can you explain in detail? I can't understand a lot of it." Hearing his words, Gai Xingkong, Wang Zanping and Wang Zanzong were all stunned. The warlord of Chan clan is asking Zhang Han for advice like a student. They felt it was a little weird, but it seemed reasonable. "You won't understand it even if I teach you." Zhang Han shook his head slightly. The warlord of Chan clan was astonished. "I'll beat this young man." While roaring silently, the warlord of Chan clan forced a smile and replied calmly, "Okay, fine." Looking at the warlord of Chan clan with a fake smile, Zhang Han was speechless but tried to explain, "This is the truth. It involves too much knowledge. How can a martial artist at the divine realm stage know all about this?" As far as the amount of knowledge was concerned, the knowledge reserve of the whole martial arts world was not as much as that of Zhang Han alone. Now that Zhang Han had corrected the methods in front of them and gave some explanations, it showed that Zhang Han regarded them as trustworthy friends. Emperor King was Zhang Han's little brother who deserved his protection, so he thought it was necessary to flex his muscles in front of Chen Chengqing. HMPH. The warlord of Chan clan looked around and then snorted. At last, he turned to glare at Chen Chengqing and said, "Ask your brother Han to explain it." Now there seemed to be many ants crawling in his heart, making him itch. If he didn't know the secret, he would lose sleep tonight. Chen Chengqing grinned, approached Zhang Han and asked, "Brother Han, just explain it." Now he was completely convinced, not only because of Zhang Han's strength, but also because of his ability to make up the methods. Zhang Han was definitely his big brother. Zhang Han slightly shook his head and said, "This set of methods is not good at all, and it isn't worth my explanation. Chengqing, you have King Dragon blood, which is relatively good, but I don't know your attribute. I know 3 kinds of methods that fit King Dragon blood well, and I can teach you as long as you are capable of learning them." The warlord of Chan clan was surprised and asked, "Isn't the set of methods engraved on the boulder enough now? It seems to be perfect. He will make rapid progress after learning the corrected methods, right? Elder Chen, that's because you haven't seen the real top-level methods." Zhang Han said with a smile, "You can't find out the true meaning of the method that I put forward, even after 10 years of study." The warlord of Chan clan's eyelids quivered slightly. His idea of beating Zhang Han became stronger. But he endured it on this occasion. After all, Chen Chengqing's cultivating methods were the most important. As for Gai Xingkong, Wang Zanping, Wang Zanzong and other onlookers, they dared not to make any sounds to disturb them. "Why don't I know the attribute of my blood?" Chen Chengqing was confused. "I don't feel the power attribute of my blood. I'll show you." Zhang Han shook his head and smiled. With his hands on his back, he looked forward at the boulder, and then waved his right hand. All kinds of stripes on the boulder suddenly moved, turning into a dragon attached to the surface of the boulder. At the same time, Zhang Han said, "Gumang, the spring god is responsible for awakening all things at the beginning of a year, and he often appears in the shape of an azure dragon, one of the 4 sacred beasts. Its corresponding hexagram in the 8 diagrams is Zen, and its corresponding attribute in the 5 elements is wood. Therefore, wood is also the main attribute of your King Dragon blood, but I don't know what its secondary attribute is. In my opinion, the most suitable cultivating method for you is not designed to match your wood attribute, but to strengthen the power of your secondary attribute, so as to fully develop your King Dragon blood." Bang! The others present felt even more confused. The warlord of Chan clan frowned. "We all know what King Dragon blood is, but we should develop Chengqing's King Dragon blood to a certain extent before we could observe what attributes it has. It's not necessary, Zhang Han looked at Chen Chengqing. Then he put his right hand on Chen Chengqing's shoulder and said calmly, "Now use the full power of King Dragon Blood." "Okay." Chen Chengqing took a deep breath. The pupils of his eyes quivered, and two green lights burst out, illuminating the whole platform. At the next moment, everyone heard a dragon roaring within Chen Chengqing's body. After checking it with their spiritual sense mind trick, they found a pattern in the shape of a dragon flashing on Chen Chengqing's back and chest, which shocked them. At the same time, they felt a strong sense of pressure. Zhang Han felt the burning pain in his hand touching Chen Chengqing's shoulder. It seemed that the King Dragon Blood hated it and began to repel it. Zen. Zhang Han activated his soul sense and formed a complicated pattern above Chen Chengqing's head. King Ming Steel. It quickly suppressed the uprising of the blood power. As the power of blood, it was not conscious and uncontrolled, and it was impossible to fight against King Ming Steel. Chen Chengqing kept releasing the power of King Dragon Blood since Zhang Han didn't ask him to stop. Knowing it was a critical moment, the warlord of Chan clan, Gaik Sinkong, and two elders of the Wang family looked at each other, daring not to make any sounds. Neither of them wanted to affect the two. Even the warlord of Chan clan stopped his heartbeat in order not to make any noise while looking at the scene like a zombie. Seconds ticked by. Zhang Han closed his eyes and felt it for 3 minutes. Then he opened his eyes and said calmly, "Okay. Who?" Chen Chengqing withdrew the light bursting out from his eyes, took a long breath, then looked at Zhang Han and said with a smile, "How about it, Brother Han? Did you feel it?" He didn't know what else he had besides the main attributes of King Dragon Blood. "What is it?" The warlord of Chan clan's heartbeat revived. Then he took a deep breath and asked, "Does he have it?" Gaik Sinkong felt a little nervous at this moment, just like waiting for the lottery to win, hoping for a good result. Of course, this was because the King Emperor and them were in the same camp. If the King Emperor was their enemy, Gaik Sinkong hoped his blood would be shit. Noticing the other's nervous look, Zhang Han smiled and said, "Congratulations, the secondary attribute of your blood is yin and corrosive, which is very high-end. Even your King Dragon Blood may be promoted to Bone Dragon Blood in the future. That's a kind of unpredictable ability that makes your enemies headache." With the help of their blood power, cultivators who had corroding attribute could learn some supernatural methods with extremely devastating power, which was so terrifying. In the whole cultivation world, their strength was at the second stage, which was the same as Zhang Han's attribute power. But Chen Chengqing only had King Dragon Blood now. Zhang Han added, "Your King Dragon Blood is quite pure, which is very good. It's a pity that less than 20% of it has been developed, but you told me it was 30%. This shows that it's difficult for you to feel the real power of your blood and make it yours." Hearing Zhang Han's words, the other martial artists were surprised. "Wait, how do you know so much?" The warlord of Chan clan realized something weird yet important. "How old is he? Why can't I understand his words? Why?" "Yes, Zhang Han, what happened to you?" Gaik Sinkong was stunned and then asked in fear, "Have other souls taken over your body?" Hiss. Wang Zanping and Wang Zanzong gasped in astonishment. "Is he the reincarnation of someone with superpowers?" "Ah?" Chen Chengqing was also shocked and then turned to look at Zhang Han. The more he turned his gaze to Zhang Han, the more likely he felt that Zhang Han's body had been taken over by someone else. They just realized that Zhang Han was only a young man in his 20s, who shouldn't understand so much. "Is my brother Han? Has his body really been taken over by someone else?" Chen Chengqing also began to doubt. Zhang Han's face stiffened when he saw Chen Chengqing's expression. "Your imagination is really wild." Zhang Han was amused. Then he thought about it and said, "It's similar to what you understand, but my body hasn't been taken over by someone else. You can imagine that I had a great chance, which was the inheritance of a very powerful person who has lived for more than 500 years. Perhaps he had obtained his own inheritance and all the memories of cultivation in 500 years,
But what he mentioned was just an inheritance, and he didn't tell them how much inheritance there was. His words shocked the others. A powerful man who has cultivated for 500 years. The warlord of Chan clan was surprised and sighed with emotion. That's really great. Then the warlord of Chan clan asked in a low voice to show his respect to that cultivator, "May I know that great cultivator's name?" Whoosh, whoosh. The others all calmed down to wait for Zhang Han's answer. Zhang Han was amused. He thought about it and then replied, "He was Han Yang Immortal." Han Yang, Immortal? The warlord of Chan clan was stunned. Oh, he must be more powerful than those cultivators at Heaven Realm since he was called immortal. Gai Xinkong sighed with emotion. That's why you called yourself Zhang Han Yang. Is it in memory of Han Yang Immortal? Yes, I think Han Yang Immortal would be very happy if he learned the news in heaven. He met a very good inheritor. Wang Zanping also sighed. Zhang Han didn't know how to reply to them. What are you talking about now? All right. Zhang Han hurriedly said, I've got the method. Don't say anything else now. The others, including the warlord of Chan clan, calmed down to look at each other again. They couldn't help admiring Zhang Han. They didn't expect Zhang Han to obtain the inheritance of a great cultivator. It turned out that his strength was reasonable. Zhang Han, don't worry. I won't say a word about your inheritance after we leave here, said the warlord of Chan clan. Ah, okay. Zhang Han nodded his head casually since he didn't want to hear what they said anymore. Then he looked at Chen Qingqing and said in a deep voice, the level of your current cultivating method is relatively low. I will teach you a new method called All-Eight Drought Demonic Dragon. After learning it, your king dragon blood will gradually change with the corroding yin attribute increasing. Of course, the process will be very long. But if you want to replace your current cultivating method with this one, you will suffer a lot, because your meridian will be recombined according to the new method. Even your danshan will gradually advance to a 9-inch danshan. Zhang Han asked him, can you bear all this? He didn't know what Chen Qingqing was thinking about. But he knew he could encourage Chen Qingqing with these words. Why not? Chen Qingqing burst out laughing. He had always been a man of his own mind. Let me explain in advance. First of all, you need to shatter your meridians and danshan. Although it will be very dangerous, you can make the most of your king dragon blood and reorganize your danshan and meridians after I teach you All-Eight Drought Demonic Dragon. At the same time, I predict that your blood will coagulate to more than 30%. It's too painful, but you must stay awake, or you may become a cripple. Zhang Han said slowly. The warlord of Chan clan was surprised. Shatter his danshan and meridians? Isn't that a kind of suicide? His face darkened. Zhang Han didn't want to say anything more at this time. He replied calmly, I've shown you the way, but it's up to you to make a choice. This. The warlord of Chan clan lost his mind, but he didn't expect that Chen Qingqing would nod his head firmly and directly. I can and I'll follow what Brother Han said. Grandpa, I believe that he will not harm me, and you should also believe me. He is my brother and I believe what he said unconditionally. The air seemed to freeze. Everyone fell into silence. The warlord of Chan clan was silent for 10 seconds, and then sighed. Well, I believe in his words. I'm just worried about you, but at least we should have a try, and I hope you can do your best this time. I will. Chen Qingqing looked firmly at Zhang Han. Let's start. Zhang Han was confused. Do you need any preparation? Ah? Chen Qingqing failed to control his mood. What preparation should I make? The most basic preparation. There's not enough spiritual qi here, and you need some arrays to calm you down and relieve pain, otherwise it will be too painful. Zhang Han explained. This. Chen Qingqing looks at his grandfather. Choose all the things you need. With a wave of his right hand, the warlord of Chan clan showed them various spirit treasures. The Chen family's material foundation should be at the top level in Huan Nation, and even the treasures summoned took up a third of the hall. They are enough.
Zhang Han smiled and then separated hundreds of pieces of treasures from them with his soul sense. Many of the spiritual herbs could form several small arrays with gems. To Zhang Han's surprise, there were more than 60 crystal stone in these gems. They could produce enough spiritual qi. Zhang Han selected some treasures and asked the warlord of Chan clan to take back the rest of them. Let's start. Zhang Han's right hand extended to the side, controlling more than 60 pieces of crystal stone. At the same time, he looked at Chen Shenking and said, "The first thing you have to do is to shatter your danshan and meridians." Wait. Chen Shenking suddenly said, "How long will it take me to recover?" "At least 1 day, at most 3 days." Zhang Han thought about it and answered, "Please wait for me in Shangjing for a few days, Brother Han." Chen Shenking smiled, "I finally have freedom. I'll spend some time following you and relax." "Haha, okay." Zhang Han nodded. What surprised Wang Zanping, Wang Zanzong and Gaik Xingkong was that they didn't expect Chen Shenking to be so decisive. Chen Shenking sat cross-legged. Boom. There was a thunder from Chen Shenking's body. Then Chen Shenking's breath weakened. His 7 apertures began to bleed as if he was dying. His danshan and meridians were all shattered. If there was no follow-up process, Chen Shenking would die soon. But Zhang Han was standing beside him.